The car's headlights were still hot when Mark Ellison and Karen Holt vanished from the southern corridor of Oklahoma City, a place with a population just over 500,000. Yet the July summer night made every road feel unusually empty. July 6th. 2006 passed in the dry, scorching heat of the plains, the cloudless sky swallowing every sound. At 1:32 a.m., the exterior camera at Riverwind Casino captured their final moment, Mark and Karen stepping out into the parking lot, smiling wearily after a long night, before getting into their silver Taurus to drive the sparsely lit stretch back toward the city. The car pulled out, its red taillights reflecting off the hot asphalt, then disappeared into the faintly shimmering night air. The driver, following behind them, only remembered the silver glow of the car gradually fading until it was completely swallowed by the darkness. What happened in the next 36 hours would haunt Oklahoma for more than a decade. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. The summer of 2006 in Oklahoma City began with layers of heat blending into the dry air of the Central State region, where residential areas stretched along the wind patterns and the wooded patches along Thunderbird Lake still retained the characteristic stillness of the south-central United States. The city was entering a period of steady growth. Industrial, service, and military life intersected, while satellite towns like Edmond and Norman continued to expand in population. In that context, the local community still maintained its inherent familiarity. People easily recognized one another at the supermarket, church, or weekend group activities. Mark Ellison, 42, residing in Edmond, worked as a technician for a mechanical equipment company and was described by many as calm, responsible, and principled. After a marriage that ended a few years earlier, he lived alone, but maintained good relations with his family and regularly participated in neighborhood activities. Karen Holt, 39, a management employee in the hospitality sector in Oklahoma City, was outgoing, open, and highly regarded at work. The two had known each other for over a year. Their relationship had developed steadily and was supported by both families. July 6, 2006 unfolded normally, according to their schedule. Mark finished his shift in the afternoon, while Karen left work earlier than usual to prepare for a short trip to Riverwind Casino in Norman, a familiar entertainment spot for them during less busy weeks. The summer atmosphere made the main route south of the city crowded but familiar. They arrived at the casino late in the evening, stayed for a few hours, and left in a relaxed mood. The parking lot camera recorded their last image at 1:20 a.m. On July 7th, Mark driving the silver Ford Taurus, Karen following behind before getting in, after which the two left the casino grounds heading back toward Oklahoma City. The next morning, the planned contact between Mark and his sister did not happen as intended. Karen also failed to show up for her morning shift and did not call to explain. Repeated calls from both families went unanswered, initially attributed to them resting after a late night, but by midday, the prolonged absence began to feel unusual. By afternoon, when Mark did not appear at a previously scheduled family gathering, concern turned into real suspicion. Both the Ellison and Holt families tried tracking possible places they might have stopped, calling hospitals, friends, and co-workers, but no one provided new information. A full day passed without any trace of their final journey. By late afternoon on July 7th, after checking all possible options, the families decided to officially report Mark Ellison and Karen Holt missing to the police, opening the initial phase of a case no one expected to stretch over more than a decade. The missing persons report from the Ellison and Holt families was forwarded to the Oklahoma County 911 Center in the early evening of July 7th and quickly classified for preliminary assessment. In 2006, the protocol for handling a missing person case in Oklahoma followed a tiered model, first determining whether the absence could be explained, then moving to risk assessment. The dispatcher recorded all initial information from the reporters, including descriptions of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt, key timelines on July 6th and 7, and details related to their communication status. The information was passed to the Missing Persons Unit of the Oklahoma City Police Department, where investigators reviewed the data to determine the urgency level. The next step was quick interviews with relatives to clarify the last time the victims were heard from or seen. The family stated that Mark and Karen left the casino around 1:20 a.m. and should have returned to Oklahoma City within an hour. They had work and family plans on July 7th, but never appeared, left no messages, and both phones were inactive. Investigators noted that neither Mark nor Karen had a history of running away, no signs of depression, debt, or personal conflicts severe enough to cause them to voluntarily leave their daily lives. Both had stable jobs, good family relationships, and no history of impulsive behavior. The lack of contact for over 12 hours in these circumstances was deemed abnormal and inconsistent with a voluntary disappearance pattern, as middle-aged individuals with fixed jobs like Mark and Karen typically maintained regular routines and honored commitments. After gathering background information, the assigned investigator contacted Riverwind Casino to confirm the final images and time of appearance. The casino's security department assisted by retrieving footage showing Mark and Karen leaving the parking lot at 1:20 a.m., corroborating the timeline provided by the family. The match between the casino data and the family's account provided crucial grounds for the police department to classify this no longer as routine loss of contact, but as a situation requiring deeper investigation. In the risk analysis phase, the Missing Persons Unit evaluated 4 factors: time missing exceeding reasonable limits, no prior behavior pattern, signs of abnormality in the final journey, and risk of foul play. All 4 factors were rated high. Therefore, the case was elevated to suspicious missing persons, allowing expanded verification scope and access to data sources not prioritized in ordinary missing cases. The official file was opened on the night of July 7th, marking the shift from initial information status to a case potentially involving external intervention, laying the foundation for the actual investigation to begin. Reconstructing the travel route of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt after leaving Riverwind Casino became the priority task once the missing persons file was upgraded to suspicious. Riverwind Casino is located in Norman, about a half-hour drive from Oklahoma City, and under normal circumstances, Mark would have taken the familiar route along State Highway 9 before merging onto I-35 North and then heading toward Edmond. Investigators used the 1:20 a.m. timestamp when the camera recorded them leaving the parking lot as the starting point to calculate a reasonable travel window. The standard route of Casino I-35 North branches into Oklahoma City's final destination in Edmond was considered likely because Mark had commuted that way for years and rarely deviated without special reason. 2006 traffic maps showed this as a relatively well-lit route with steady nighttime traffic and few congestion points between 1-2 a.m. at an average speed of about 65-70 miles per hour on that stretch. Mark's car should have reached the southern edge of Oklahoma City around 1:35-1:40 a.m. and arrived in Edmond no later than 2 a.m. However, their disappearance and lack of contact after dawn raised questions about a possible incident along the route from Norman to Oklahoma City, making it necessary to break the route into risk zones. When analyzing the map, investigators identified 3 high-variability segments. First, the transition area between Norman and Moore, with many curves and limited lighting. Second, the Moore outskirts bordering southern Oklahoma City, where several lightly monitored side roads branched off. And third, the expanded I-35 corridor approaching the central area, where vehicles could exit onto less traveled roads at night. These segments were viewed as possible locations for unusual events, including forced stops, unwanted approaches, or route changes. The next objective was to identify camera systems within the route boundaries. In 2006, Oklahoma lacked the modern traffic camera networks of later years, so data collection relied mainly on private business cameras, gas stations, convenience stores, 24-hour lots, and some industrial facilities near highways. Investigators compiled a list of over 20 potential locations that could have captured vehicle images between 1:22 a.m. Among them, 4 gas stations along I-35 were prioritized because their cameras often faced the road directly and operated overnight with longer data storage. Several small trucking facilities near Moore were also included, as their lots typically had cameras monitoring the front road for cargo protection. Additionally, 24-hour convenience stores, especially at major intersections like Indian Hills Road and 12th Avenue, were considered potential sources of key footage, with many cameras angled toward parking areas and main roads. After finalizing the review list, the next step was to develop a prioritized video checking plan. Investigators first focused on locations near the casino to determine if Mark and Karen left the area in the expected direction or turned onto another route. Next came points between Norman and Moore to check whether the Ford Taurus appeared consistently within reasonable time intervals or showed signs of slowing, sudden stopping, or unusual turns. Footage from the Moore outskirts was especially critical, as this was the transition between densely populated areas and the southern approach to Oklahoma City, a zone with many side roads leading to low-light locations where incidents could occur undetected. In parallel with video collection, the team established expected timeframes for each segment: Casino to Norman city limits, Norman to Moore, Moore to Oklahoma City. This allowed comparison of received camera images against projected speed and timing. If any segment lacked data or showed timing discrepancies, it could indicate an anomaly, opening avenues for deeper investigation. By the end of the route reconstruction phase, police had outlined a plausible travel model and pinpointed key areas for closer scrutiny. Although no direct evidence of an incident on the road had been obtained, building the route and related camera system provided a vital foundation, enabling subsequent investigative steps to be more focused rather than overly broad. Overall, the route reconstruction effort shifted the case from vague uncertainty about timing and location to a clearer structure, where timelines and map points began to take shape, effectively supporting the search for traces of the 2 missing individuals. The first concrete piece of information related to the disappearance of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt emerged on the morning of July 8, when a resident near the eastern edge of Oklahoma County called to report an unusually parked vehicle on the shoulder of I-40, not far from the exit near the town of Hera. The man said the car had been there since the previous evening, but remained in the same spot by morning, with no signs of movement and no driver returning. The report was immediately forwarded to the Missing Persons Unit, and the license plate was confirmed to match the Ford Taurus Mark had driven away from the casino. When investigators arrived at the scene, they noted the car pulled off onto the dirt shoulder, with no collision damage, no skid marks, or signs of hard braking. The parking position did not match normal stopping behavior. The car was angled slightly, not parallel to the shoulder, and positioned just far enough from the pavement to avoid traffic, but not in any standard emergency parking alignment. All 4 doors were closed, windows intact, headlights off, and no signs of forced entry from outside. The surrounding environment was a mix of dry soil, low grass, and scattered brush typical of the eastern Oklahoma City suburbs, with a small path leading from the road down to a depressed area beside it, where the terrain began transitioning to semi-wooded semi-grassland. Investigators assessed that the car's presence at this location was inconsistent with Mark's intended route, as this stretch lay farther east, at least 10 miles off the path to Edmond. This suggested the vehicle may have been redirected or deliberately turned off the main route during the period of no contact. Closer observation revealed no rutting or compression under the tires, as would occur from rapid acceleration or sudden stopping. Instead, it appeared the car had been driven there and stopped under control. There were no debris, oil leaks, or fluid spills, indicating no mechanical failure. Additionally, the area around the car saw little nighttime traffic, and there were no traffic cameras or business cameras directly facing the road, making it difficult to capture the moment the vehicle arrived. Combining this with prior map and timeline data, investigators concluded that the discovery location was highly likely the site of an incident, or at least an intermediate point in the chain of events surrounding the 2 victims' disappearance. From the abnormality of the parking position, the team outlined the need to survey a wider area around the car, particularly the space behind the shoulder where the ground sloped down into a sparsely wooded region. An area of 500–700 meters around the vehicle was designated as the primary zone for checking footprints, other tire marks, discarded items, or any clues related to Mark and Karen's condition. Additionally, small dirt roads branching from the stopping point were added to the survey list due to their potential connection to subsequent movement by the driver. Whether Mark or an unidentified third party, the presence of the intact, undamaged Ford Taurus without its owners opened a new investigative direction for the missing persons case and clearly defined the geographic area for focused efforts in the next phase. Right after Mark Ellison's Ford Taurus was found abandoned with no signs of mechanical failure or external impact, ground search teams were deployed in the vicinity of the scene to determine whether the two victims might still be in the nearby area or to locate any evidence of their movement. Phase 1 of the search was established using a concentric radius model, starting from the vehicle's location and gradually expanding outward, combining visual searches, grid searches, and support from cadaver dogs and trailing dogs. In the first ring, the investigative team conducted a direct survey along the roadside edge where the car was parked, focusing on the ground around the tires, the slope down to lower areas, low grass patches, and open dirt. The goal was to find basic signs such as footprints, drag marks, dropped items, unusual scratches on the grass, or any disturbance indicating the presence of the two individuals the previous night. However, the dry soil with the characteristic sandy composition in the eastern Oklahoma City area does not hold impressions for long, especially with strong nighttime winds, causing surface signs to be erased within just a few hours. In the second search ring, the radius was expanded to approximately 200 meters, including the small dirt road leading down to the sparse tree area behind the parking spot. The dogs were given scents from the driver's seat and the passenger side door, then led downward into lower terrain, but completely lost the trail near a section of thin grass-covered dirt road. This suggested that if the individuals had left the vehicle on foot, they may have stepped onto dry sandy ground or been transported by another vehicle, preventing the dogs from continuing to follow the scent trail. Investigators carefully checked scattered bushes around the area, but found no items likely belonging to Mark or Karen. They paid particular attention to spots with disturbed grass, natural depressions in the soil, and any seemingly fresh indentations, but there was no clear evidence of burial, dragging, or struggle. The third search phase expanded the radius to approximately 500–700 meters, where the terrain began shifting from gentle slopes to flatter ground, interspersed with clusters of taller brush. The grid search team divided the area into small sections to ensure no suspicious points were missed. Some unusual tire tracks were noted on the dirt road, but it was difficult to determine their age because the scene was near a residential area with frequent vehicle traffic over time. Additionally, the dry ground and strong July winds typical of Oklahoma quickly faded light impressions, complicating efforts to date them and assess relevance to the disappearance. The search team also considered the possibility that the two victims sought shelter in wooded areas or along dirt roads but found no signs of habitation such as water bottle caps, clothing fragments, personal items, or resting spots. During the sweep, they noted that the area had no nearby water source and no large natural shelters, increasing suspicion that if the two had left the vehicle at this location, it would have been difficult for them to move deep into the woods without leaving clearer signs. When compiling all observations, the investigative team concluded that no initial traces were detected due to three main factors: dry soil conditions that quickly erased impressions, strong nighttime winds from the south-southeast that distorted scent trails and surface marks, and a moderate level of local foot and vehicle traffic that mixed old and new traces. At the same time, no indicators were found suggesting Mark or Karen had left the vehicle on foot in a direction allowing continued movement, further reinforcing the assessment that the Ford Taurus was deliberately abandoned or staged at this location rather than resulting from a personal incident during travel. The lack of clear traces in Phase 1 caused the investigation's focus to gradually shift to other factors outside the immediate scene area, but the findings here remained crucial in shaping the possibility that the two victims did not voluntarily leave the vehicle, while highlighting numerous points of suspicion regarding the car's appearance at a location completely inconsistent with their usual route. The interior examination of Mark Ellison's Ford Taurus was conducted immediately after completing the preliminary search around the scene to determine whether there were any signs indicating the two victims had left the vehicle voluntarily. The process began by mapping the vehicle's interior scene. Every seat position, dashboard surface, floor mats, storage compartments, and trunk were photographed, documented, and marked to ensure all evidence was collected systematically. The driver's seat remained adjusted to Mark's familiar position based on family descriptions and prior driving records. There were no signs that anyone else had altered the recline or pedal distance, suggesting the last driver was most likely Mark himself. On the dashboard, the key was no longer in the ignition but showed no signs of being broken or forced. The cup holder contained an empty paper cup and a few small scraps of paper, nothing unusual. On the passenger seat, Karen's purse was placed neatly, with the strap untwisted, the contents inside, wallet, identification, small makeup bag and cell phone, were all in their original positions. This was significant because in voluntary or hurried departures, victims typically take essential items, especially phones. The fact that both phones remained in the vehicle reinforced the conclusion that they did not leave the vehicle of their own accord without external intervention. In the rear seat, no personal items were discarded or left behind. The floor mats showed no chaotic tread marks, only natural accumulated dirt over time. There were also no signs of anyone hiding or sitting in the back during the final trip. The trunk contained basic items, a vehicle toolkit, a light jacket, and an old cloth bag unrelated to the disappearance. None showed signs of recent use near the time the car was abandoned. Upon closer inspection of surfaces, investigators noted the absence of signs of struggle or attempted escape from the vehicle. There were no fingernail scratches on the doors or heavy footprint impressions on the mats. Interior door handles showed no fresh scratches, and the passenger side seatbelt was not stretched in a manner indicating restraint. All of this suggested that if there had been intervention, it did not occur while Mark and Karen were still inside the vehicle, or at least not with obvious force. The forensic team's preliminary analysis focused on the significance of both phones being left inside. In typical missing persons cases, victims tend to keep their phones for communication, location, or seeking help. Leaving both devices along with important personal items increased the likelihood that they were separated from the vehicle unexpectedly or compelled to leave. This became even more notable when considering the position of Karen's purse. It was placed exactly as it had been before leaving the casino. With no signs of being rummaged through or opened, this reduced the possibility that they voluntarily exited and left belongings due to any emergency-related reason. Examination of the steering wheel, gear shift and controls showed no prominent foreign fingerprints beyond Mark's, which could indicate either that the vehicle was not driven by anyone else after Mark left it, or that any other driver consciously avoided leaving traces on touched surfaces. Both the driver's and passenger doors showed no signs of being pried open, meaning any movement of the vehicle by another party would have required access to the keys or forcing Mark to exit without disturbance. Overall, interior observations revealed a high degree of orderliness and no evidence reflecting haste, fear, or self-liberation by the victims. This significantly ruled out the possibility that the two stopped due to a medical emergency or mechanical issue. Instead, the vehicle appeared to have been deliberately stopped at a location inconsistent with the route toward Edmond, then abandoned in complete stillness. From this, The investigative team assessed a significant level of third-party involvement, as the entire arrangement inside the vehicle bore no trace of voluntary departure by the two individuals, but rather reflected a situation of forced separation from the vehicle without opportunity to prepare. The car became the first piece of evidence indicating that the disappearance likely involved coercive elements rather than an unexpected incident or voluntary withdrawal from daily life. Analysis of the cell phone signals from Mark Ellison and Karen Holt became the next step immediately after completing the interior examination of the Ford Taurus, as this was one of the few remaining tools capable of reconstructing their final journey on the night they vanished. In 2006, the ability to retrieve precise location data from carriers was still limited compared to later technologies, but call detail records and cell tower connection logs still provided critical data about the last times the devices transmitted or received signals. Investigators contacted the carriers for both Mark and Karen to request detailed records from 11 p.m. on July 6 through noon on July 7, focusing on call logs, text messages, and especially automatic device connections to cell towers along their travel path. The return data revealed one notable common point: both phones functioned normally until shortly before 1:40 a.m., consistent with the time frame after Mark and Karen left the casino and were en route back toward Oklahoma City. The last tower to register signals from both devices was in the area south of Lake Stanley Draper, more than 10 miles from where the car was ultimately found, but still within a plausible travel corridor if the vehicle had exited I-35 and either inadvertently or deliberately turned onto secondary roads. The fact that both phones lost signal within a short time window, with no subsequent activity such as calls, texts, or reconnections, raised three primary possibilities: the devices were deliberately powered off, forcibly powered off, or entered an area with no coverage. However, analysis of 2006 coverage maps showed that the area south of Lake Stanley Draper had relatively stable coverage, with no large dead zones sufficient to cause both phones to lose connection simultaneously and completely. This made the no coverage possibility less convincing. The second possibility, both victims deliberately turning off their phones, was also inconsistent with their usual behavior. According to family accounts, Mark rarely powered off his phone at night, especially while driving home, and Karen almost never turned hers off without a clear reason. Both maintained stable work and communication schedules with no habit of going dark during unusual hours. This increased the weight of the third possibility: the devices were forcibly powered off or separated from power under circumstances beyond their control. Missing persons cases involving third-party intervention often show similar patterns, last signals appearing at a point distant from where the vehicle or bodies are found, phones abruptly going silent without transitional activity, and no further appearances on any towers afterward. When cross-referencing the time of the last signal with the estimated time the car appeared near I-40 around dawn, investigators concluded that Mark and Karen may have been separated from the vehicle sometime between these 2 points. The final signal location was southeast of the standard route, meaning the vehicle may have deviated from I-35, traveled through secondary roads near the Lake Draper area, and only later appeared at the I-40 location. The car's position far from the last signal point further supported the hypothesis of an unusual diversion, pointing to possible third-party control or direct interference with their journey. Based on the last signal area, the investigative team outlined the region surrounding Lake Stanley Draper as a priority for deeper survey, particularly dirt roads, side paths, and open lots where a vehicle could stop unnoticed. Topographic maps were used to assess terrain, combined with coverage data to identify potential short-term stopping points before the vehicle was moved to its final discovered location. The search focus shifted to the corridor south and southeast of the lake, an area with sparse population, many poorly lit roads, and conditions conducive to either an unintended incident or deliberate intervention. The team also analyzed the possibility that the two victims left the vehicle on foot in the last signal area, but the fact that both phones were left inside the car made this hypothesis illogical. Although limited, the carrier data provided one key piece of information: the final signal location did not match the abandoned vehicle's position, creating a significant geographic gap in the case timeline. That distance became the first high-priority zone for the investigative team to gather additional evidence, as it reflected the last moment before all traces of the two individuals completely vanished from the communication system. After analyzing the phone signals and determining the last signal loss area for Mark Ellison and Karen Holt in the southern region of Lake Stanley Draper, the next step for the investigation team was to check all available camera systems along the routes from Riverwind Casino to the location where the Ford Taurus was found. In 2006, Oklahoma City did not yet have a widespread traffic camera network like in later decades, so the primary data sources came from security cameras at convenience stores, gas stations, trucking facilities, and some businesses located near major intersections. The prioritized camera list was compiled based on three criteria: being within a reasonable radius, according to the timeline, facing toward major roads, and operating during nighttime hours. The investigators started in Norman, where Riverwind Casino is located, and proceeded north along I-35. The first gas station at the HWY 9 intersection was requested to provide video from approximately 1:20–1:40 a.m. The footage showed a silver sedan matching the description of Mark's Taurus passing through the area around 1:27 a.m. without stopping. Although the camera quality was low, the headlights and vehicle shape were consistent enough to provide a basis for believing it was their vehicle. Continuing toward Moore, investigators checked a camera at a 24-hour convenience store near the Telephone Road intersection. There was no clear image here, but a blurry video segment captured a similar vehicle passing by around 1:34 a.m. This time frame aligned with the cell tower analysis previously calculated by the team, reinforcing that Mark and Karen were still on their route home during this period. As the vehicle was believed to continue toward the boundary between Moore and South Oklahoma City, a camera at a small trucking facility near 4th Street recorded a silver vehicle heading north around 1:38 a.m. This was the last point in the collected video chain where the vehicle's journey matched the standard I-35 north route. After this timestamp, a change appeared at a store camera near the intersection of Hesse 89th Street and Sooner Road, completely off to the east. No images of the vehicle were recorded in any time frame matching predictions. This indicated the vehicle did not continue straight on I-35 toward Edmond, but had turned onto a different side route. The anomaly became clearer when investigators checked a camera at a small store near Douglas Boulevard in the area west of Lake Stanley Draper. Video, at 1:42 a.m., captured headlights from a silver sedan moving eastward, away from the main I-35 corridor. Although the image quality was insufficient to confirm the license plate, the location closely matched the final phone signal area. This timestamp led police to conclude that Mark and Karen had abnormally left the main traffic corridor, either voluntarily or under compulsion. It also explained why phone signal data showed the final area southeast of Oklahoma City rather than along the direct route to Edmond. When cross-referencing the camera images with the adjusted timeline based on cell records, a new movement sequence emerged. The vehicle left the casino at 1:20, appeared at HWY 9 at 1:27, passed through Moore at 1:34, appeared at the trucking facility at 1:38, deviated toward Lake Draper before 1:42 a.m. However, from that point until the vehicle was found near I-40 by Hera, no cameras captured the subsequent journey. This data gap lasted over 20 minutes. Enough time for the vehicle to travel through quiet roads or sparse wooded areas unreachable by cameras. In reality, many small businesses in southeast Oklahoma City in 2006 either had no nighttime operating cameras or retained video for too short a period. So by the time police arrived to collect it, the data had been overwritten. This made reconstructing the route difficult and pointed to the possibility that the vehicle had traveled through remote roads before being abandoned on I-40. Nevertheless, confirming the exact timestamps of 1:27 1:34, 1:38, and 1:42 a.m. allowed the investigation team to rule out many inconsistent routes and narrow down the possible paths the vehicle could have taken. The fact that the Taurus headed southeast instead of continuing toward Edmond was an unusual factor, indicating a deliberate change, voluntary or forced, had occurred, reinforcing initial suspicions that Mark and Karen's journey could not have ended simply with the vehicle being abandoned. After completing the collection of camera data and partially reconstructing the route of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt, the investigation team moved to another critical pillar of information, interviewing all possible witnesses who might have seen the two individuals from before they left Riverwind Casino until signs of lost contact appeared. The witness list was divided into three groups: those who had direct contact with them inside the casino, employees or passers-by present at locations along the route, and residents living around the area where the Ford Taurus was discovered. At Riverwind Casino, security staff and dealers were interviewed first. A floor manager recalled that Mark and Karen appeared completely normal throughout the evening. They played cards, chatted casually, and showed no signs of stress or anxiety. No one saw them arguing, and there was certainly no indication they were being followed or approached by strangers. A female server noted that Karen left the impression of being cheerful, polite, and showing no signs of trouble. These consistent statements led police to rule out the possibility that the two left the casino in an abnormal state or under psychological pressure that might have led to voluntary departure. The second witness was a driver who left the casino in the same 1:15–1:25 a.m. window. He remembered seeing a silver sedan leave the parking lot just ahead of his own vehicle. Although he could not confirm it was Mark's car, the description matched the camera footage. This driver stated that traffic on HWY 9 at that time was quite light, and no vehicles appeared unusual or stopped in the middle of the road. This detail helped police reinforce the assessment that the deviation from the main route did not occur immediately after leaving the casino. In the Moore area, investigators approached a night shift employee at the convenience store near Telephone Road, where the blurry camera had recorded a similar vehicle. Although the employee did not remember every car passing during such late hours, he confirmed seeing no one park or get out between 1:32 a.m., and there were no crashes, noises, or attention-grabbing behaviors that night. This further eliminated the possibility of an incident occurring in Moore. When expanding interviews to businesses around Lake Stanley Draper, the area matching the final phone signal zone, police recorded two important statements. The first came from a night shift maintenance worker at a trucking facility near SE 89th Street. He reported hearing a vehicle speeding on the narrow road behind the facility around 1:45 a.m., but could not see clearly due to poor lighting. Although not sufficient to confirm it was the Taurus, the timing and location aligned with the timeline, giving the statement referential value. The second witness was a resident living near Douglas Boulevard. She said vehicles occasionally passed at night, but that evening she observed nothing unusual: no shouting, no crashes, no headlights lingering abnormally. While not directly supportive, her statement helped determine that if intervention against Mark and Karen had occurred, it did not take place in residential areas along the road, but possibly deeper into the network of back roads. The final group of witnesses related to the area where the vehicle was found near I-40. The man who reported the car was the only witness to note its appearance before police arrived. He said he saw the vehicle near dawn, but it was dark, and he saw no one around it. He confirmed hearing no engine shut off, seeing no lights on, and observing no one walking away from the car. This increased the likelihood that the Ford Taurus was brought to that location quietly, possibly by someone who left immediately or within a short, unnoticed time frame. When evaluating the reliability of the statements, investigators analyzed consistency between the accounts and confirmed facts. All casino witnesses described the victim's stable mental state. Route witnesses reported no fleeing behavior or signs of conflict between them, and witnesses near the vehicle described the sudden, silent appearance of the vehicle. No statement suggested Mark or Karen were actively avoiding family, seeking to hide, or expressing a desire to leave their current life. On the contrary, All information reinforced that the two were heading home normally, with no reason to disappear voluntarily. When cross-referencing the statements with the intact state of belongings in the car, the fact that both phones were left behind, and the unusual route leading southeast, the investigation team concluded that the disappearance could not have stemmed from an active decision by the victims. There was no evidence suggesting they left the vehicle in full conscious control or with prior planning. Instead, everything pointed to external intervention occurring in the short window between the last camera timestamp and the phone signal loss area. Compiling the witness statements significantly narrowed the time window, ruled out voluntary disappearance, and strengthened the conclusion that coercive intervention caused Mark and Karen to abruptly leave their normal lives. Compiling all data from the scene, travel route, phone signal analysis, camera checks, and witness interviews allowed the investigation team to move to a crucial phase, developing a system of hypotheses to explain the cause of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt's disappearance. All information gathered up to this point pointed to three key characteristics. The vehicle was undamaged but abandoned in a location unrelated to the route home. Both phones were suddenly turned off in the southern Lake Stanley Draper area, and there was no evidence. The victims voluntarily left the vehicle or exhibited preparatory behavior. Based on these facts, three main hypotheses were established. The first hypothesis: an unexpected incident caused the two to leave the vehicle, including the possibility they encountered a stranger, stopped to assist or faced an emergency, and were forced to exit the vehicle. This hypothesis explained the sudden phone shutdown and intact belongings in the car, but had a major weakness. No evidence showed Mark or Karen actively stopping on the main route, and the vehicle's final location was so far off route that it did not fit any spontaneous stop pattern. Moreover, no witnesses reported them experiencing trouble or interacting with strangers on the road. The second hypothesis: the victims were attacked on their way home and forced to leave the vehicle. This hypothesis fit most of the evidence: phones forcibly turned off at the same time. Vehicle abandoned in a place outside their itinerary. No personal items taken, and the arrangement inside the vehicle suggesting no major struggle but possible restraint before they could react. Its strength was consistency with all data gaps, especially the roughly 20-minute period between the last camera timestamp and the signal loss area. However, the weakness was the lack of direct evidence of the intervention point, such as physical traces or witnesses seeing suspicious activity. The third hypothesis: the disappearance was related to a personal relationship, specifically the possibility that someone known to or previously in conflict with Mark or Karen intervened in their journey. This arose from the fact that many abductions involve personal conflicts or romantic relationships. However, at this point, there was no evidence of disputes with acquaintances. Both maintained stable lives with no recent threats. The biggest drawback was the lack of supporting data. No family or friends provided information about serious conflicts. Still, this hypothesis was retained because crimes involving known individuals often leave few initial traces. After comparing the three hypotheses, the team analyzed pros and cons based on three criteria: fit with the timeline, ability to explain the unusual route deviation, and match with the behavior evidenced in the vehicle. The first hypothesis was gradually eliminated because it could not explain why the vehicle appeared at a final location far from where phone signals ceased. The third hypothesis was temporarily deprioritized due to lack of signs of conflict or involved parties. The second hypothesis, victims being overpowered and forced to leave the vehicle in a short period after deviating from the main route, was deemed the best overall fit with the data. It explained the route deviation, simultaneous signal loss, intact condition of items, and deliberate abandonment of the vehicle. The prioritized investigation direction was set to search for signs of third-party intervention along the segment from the Lake Stanley Draper area to the abandonment location, while examining the possibility that criminal activity occurred during the time frame coinciding with the phone signal loss area, the moment considered pivotal in the entire disappearance case. After the hypothesis of third-party intervention was established as the priority investigative direction, the case team shifted to analyzing personal relationships that could potentially provide a motive for the disappearance of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt. Among the relationships reviewed, the most notable was the connection between Mark and his ex-wife, Diana Ellison, who had a long history of conflict with him spanning many years after their divorce. Police began by gathering legal records related to the two, including post-divorce disputes, child custody matters, and notable past incidents. The data showed that Mark and Diana's marriage ended acrimoniously in 2003. After the divorce, Mark was awarded primary custody of the child, while Diana was granted only scheduled visitation rights. Some records documented instances where Diana came to Mark's home outside permitted hours, causing tension and leading to several minor reports to local police about her appearing at inappropriate times. Mark's family stated that Diana repeatedly expressed unwillingness to accept his starting a new relationship, and in some conversations, she displayed clear anger when mentioning Karen Holt, whom she believed was replacing the role of a mother in the family. When interviewing Mark and Diana's daughter, investigators received information reinforcing concerns that Diana may have harbored a certain obsession with Mark's life. The daughter recounted that there were periods when her mother frequently drove through the area around Mark's house, even at night, and sometimes called him repeatedly just to check where he was. These behaviors, while not sufficient to qualify as legally threatening conduct, were signs of prolonged psychological strain, a factor many investigations have noted as an early indicator of potential violence risk. As the investigation delved deeper, they uncovered a series of events in the 2 years leading up to Mark's disappearance, showing that Diana may have harbored strong negative emotions. A former coworker of hers reported that Diana had once said she couldn't stand seeing Mark move on to a new relationship. Another friend stated that Diana had blurted out that things would be easier if he just disappeared. These statements were never formally reported, but they painted a picture of someone struggling with persistent jealousy and lingering hurt. Another noteworthy detail emerged when police examined Diana's phone records. In the 6 months before Mark and Karen disappeared, Diana made over 400 calls to Mark's number, many occurring late at night or at unusual hours. Mark had told his sister that he felt stalked and that these calls were seriously affecting his personal life. This placed Diana on the list of individuals requiring higher-level motive evaluation. While working with Mark's family, investigators were provided additional information about an incident in 2005 when Diana came to Mark's house and attempted to talk while he was away. According to accounts, Diana entered the backyard, walked around the window area, and called his name. The event did not result in a formal report, but indicated behavior exceeding her personal boundaries. A member of Karen's family also revealed that Karen had shared about receiving phone calls from Diana leaving angry-voiced messages. These facts helped clarify the picture. Diana not only had conflict with Mark, but also harbored hostility toward Karen, believing their relationship had completely destroyed the original family. In overall assessment, the investigative team identified Diana Ellison as having the clearest motive in the early stages of the case. She had experienced post-divorce conflict, loss of custody, exhibited stalking behavior toward Mark, and showed tension toward Karen. Past behaviors such as frequent calling, appearing at unusual times, or expressing hostility verbally raised the level of suspicion toward Diana significantly. The team placed her in the high-alert suspect category and began examining her timeline and location on the night Mark and Karen disappeared, as only by proving she lacked an alibi or exhibited suspicious behavior during the critical time window could motive be linked to actual action. However, Diana's prior behaviors combined with the level of relational tension made her the first subject to be seriously considered in the chain of hypotheses related to personal relationships. When Diana Ellison was first invited in for questioning, investigators had prepared a set of questions centered on the critical timeline from 1:20 to 2:30 a.m. on July 7th, the window consistent with collected camera data and phone signals. Diana appeared cooperative but visibly tense, repeatedly asserting she had no involvement in Mark and Karen's disappearance. She stated that on the evening of July 6th, she was home alone after getting off work at 9 p.m., watched TV until around midnight, then went to bed. When asked for more detail, Diana said she did not leave the house that night and had no contact with anyone after 10 p.m., except for a brief call to her sister earlier in the evening. She emphasized that she had no idea where Mark and Karen were and no longer cared about keeping track of them, attempting to present herself as having moved past post-divorce tensions. However, investigators quickly identified suspicious elements in her statement. The first issue arose when police cross-checked her claim of being home with phone records. Data showed no phone activity from Diana after 9 p.m., but there was also no evidence confirming the device was at home. The cell tower connection remained within a broad coverage area, unable to pinpoint an exact location. This made her account unverifiable beyond self-reporting. Another significant gap concerned the period from midnight to 2 a.m. When asked to describe in more detail her going to bed around midnight, she appeared flustered and altered her account. First saying she fell asleep right after turning off the TV, then saying maybe read a book for a bit, but could not recall how long or what book. This inconsistency was noted as a sign of an unstable statement. When asked if she left the house at any point after midnight, Diana denied it absolutely. But her tone shifted noticeably, and she became defensive, claiming police were trying to pin something on her that she didn't do. Investigators recorded that this behavior matched psychological patterns often seen in individuals with information to hide rather than those completely innocent. Another issue emerged when police mentioned rumors from acquaintances that Diana sometimes drove at night. She strongly refuted it, saying she never drove late at night due to fear of accidents and poor night vision. However, her vehicle insurance claim records from the previous year showed her car had headlights repaired after a collision at 1 a.m., a time inconsistent with her current statement. When questioned about this, Diana said she didn't remember the incident but suggested maybe someone else drove it. This response created yet another contradiction. Investigators also asked Diana about her recent feelings toward Mark and Karen. Initially, she claimed no longer caring about Mark's life, but when asked why she still frequently called him in the months before the disappearance, she said they were just calls to check on the kids and that if there were too many, it was out of worry. However, when shown the figure of over 400 calls in 6 months, many scattered after midnight, Diana hesitated and said she didn't remember calling that much. This memory gap was deemed unusual, especially given the frequency had been enough for Mark to complain to family. Most notably was Diana's reaction when directly asked if she knew Mark and Karen had gone to the casino on the evening of July 6th. Instead of answering immediately, she countered, "Who told you they went there?" A question investigators noted as a possible indication she had been monitoring or had prior knowledge about them. When asked to explain why she asked that, Diana only said just curious and quickly denied knowing anything. Toward the end of the session, investigators summarized the inconsistencies to gauge Diana's reaction. She became guarded and shifted to blaming others, saying Mark's family always thinks the worst of me and police were just trying to frame me. The rapid emotional shifts, inconsistent answers, and hard-to-explain gaps in her account made the first session with Diana a crucial source of data. Although no direct evidence yet linked her to the disappearance, investigators documented a cumulative chain of small contradictions, unverifiable timeline, unexplained nighttime driving, prior hostility toward Mark and Karen, and evasive responses to sensitive questions. These factors kept Diana in the high-alert suspect group, requiring deeper verification steps in the next phase of the investigation. Alongside documenting the inconsistencies in Diana Ellison's statement, the investigative team moved to analyze her financial data, a key step to determine whether there was evidence of premeditation for unusual travel on the night of Mark and Karen's disappearance. Per 2006 investigative procedures, police required a court order to obtain bank and credit card data, and once approved, they reviewed all transactions from 3 months prior through 1 week after July 7th. Investigators paid particular attention to transactions near the time of the disappearance, as these often revealed signs of preparation, purchases of supplies, or fuel for off-route travel. Upon cross-referencing, they discovered a notable transaction within 48 hours before the disappearance. On the afternoon of July 6th, Diana purchased 2 5-gallon gas cans at an AutoZone store in Midwest City. This transaction had not appeared in her prior statement, and when checking months of purchase history, the team found Diana had not bought large gas cans for at least the previous year. This detail was immediately flagged as unusual because Diana owned no equipment requiring bulk fuel storage, such as a generator, boat, or large power mower. Additionally, her vehicle, a small sedan, did not require carrying reserve fuel for long trips. Investigators further checked the receipt to confirm the type of cans purchased, standard 5-gallon plastic ones, typically used in scenarios requiring continuous travel without stopping at gas stations. Buying 2 cans, totaling 10 gallons, raised the question, why would Diana need such a large reserve of fuel right before Mark and Karen disappeared? Reviewing AutoZone store camera footage, blurry images confirmed Diana was indeed the purchaser of the 2 gas cans, verifying the transaction's accuracy. This heightened suspicion because in the previous interview, Diana had asserted she didn't leave the house after 9 p.m. and didn't do anything special on July 6th. Her complete failure to mention purchasing gas cans on the very day of the disappearance was a sign of untruthful or deliberately withheld information. Investigators began analyzing whether this transaction related to a plan for extended travel to avoid appearing at gas stations along the route, locations where security cameras could capture vehicle or driver images. Through route analysis, they determined that if Diana wanted to travel from her home to the southern area of Lake Stanley Draper, then onward to the eastern region where the Ford Taurus was abandoned without refueling, 2 5-gallon cans could provide over 200 kilometers of additional range, enough to operate in remote areas without appearing at any gas station during the night. This pattern matched many cases where perpetrators deliberately avoided camera risks during victim or vehicle transport to another location. Furthermore, Diana's financial record showed no prior habit in preceding months of purchasing fuel outside regular gas stations. There were no transactions for reserve or emergency gas cans. This made the July 6th purchase a standalone event, coinciding precisely with the disappearance. When compared to common patterns in forcible intervention cases, many investigators noted the match perpetrators often prepared for extended travel without leaving electronic traces. Purchasing gas cans was a typical method when the goal was to evade cameras. Additionally, in her phone records, Diana had no calls or messages in the 6 hours before and throughout the disappearance period, a notable gap consistent with behavior during remote travel or execution of actions they wished to leave no electronic trail for. Further analysis revealed a small cash transaction at a convenience store near Diana's home also occurred that same afternoon, when she bought 2 bottles of water and paper towels, items commonly prepared for long drives, further reinforcing suspicion of preparation for a covert trip. The investigative team documented the chain of unusual transactions within 12 hours before Mark and Karen disappeared. Purchase of 2 large gas cans, purchase of travel support items, and Diana's failure to mention any of these transactions in her statement. These elements increased the likelihood that Diana had intentionally prepared for a nighttime journey, one potentially directly related to the route Mark and Karen had taken. Based on the financial evidence, police concluded that Diana not only withheld information, but also likely engaged in premeditated actions before Mark and Karen left the casino. The gas can purchase became one of the strongest indicators of off-route travel planning and potentially an initial step in a sequence of actions aimed at accessing, following, or intervening in the victim's journey. Based on the last phone signals of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt appearing near the southern area of Lake Stanley Draper and the geographic progression leading toward the Lake Thunderbird area, investigators decided to expand the search to cover the entire corridor between these 2 locations. A wide strip of terrain with sparse forest intermixed with grasslands, numerous lightly traveled dirt roads, and many branching trails leading deep into secluded areas. However, Lake Thunderbird and its surrounding region feature complex terrain with dense thickets in many spots, natural steep banks, shallow water areas interspersed with small marshes, and dozens of secondary roads formed over time by campers, fishermen, and recreational vehicles. The search teams began by outlining a radius consistent with the final phone signal locations, then expanding to positions accessible by vehicle but unlikely to be spotted at night. They used topographic maps combined with 2006 satellite imagery to identify low-lying areas, tree-covered zones, dead-end red dirt roads, and potential parking spots that would avoid any camera coverage. The dirt roads connecting Lake Stanley Draper and Lake Thunderbird were closely examined due to their remote nature and potential as transfer points in any journey that took Mark and Karen off the main route. As the search teams deployed in a grid pattern, they quickly encountered a major challenge. The layered terrain made visual searching highly inefficient. Grass fields, 1.5 meters tall, could easily conceal trampled traces after just a day or two, especially under the strong winds typical of July in Oklahoma. The soil around the lake, a mix of sand and red clay, was easily disturbed by animals or passing vehicles, causing any valuable investigative traces to disappear much faster than in other regions. Teams sweeping along the dirt roads looked for signs such as scraps of fabric, personal items, or freshly disturbed soil, but found no matching points. Many paths leading into secluded areas were checked with cadaver dogs, but the dogs only alerted briefly for a few seconds before losing the scent, a sign that if human presence had occurred, the odor had either dissipated or become overwhelmed by the local animal and vegetation smells. When the search shifted closer to the water's edge at Lake Thunderbird, police paid attention to low mud flats and soft soil patches capable of retaining footprints. However, because the search took place many days later, the ground had already dried and hardened, and any traces that might have existed were no longer intact. The lake also has numerous sudden deep-water drop-offs with soft bottoms, where objects could quickly sink or be displaced by wind currents. This made underwater searching nearly impossible in the early phase of the investigation due to the lack of specific coordinates to narrow the scope. The sparse wooded areas around the lake, which contain many temporary shelter spots used by fishermen or campers, were also swept but revealed no items suggesting Mark or Karen had ever been present. During the assessment, the search team noted that the local terrain was almost ideal for concealing evidence: multiple layers of brush, easily erased ground surfaces, rapidly changing humidity throughout the day, and a variety of vehicle tracks so diverse that distinguishing old from new became extremely difficult. These combined factors made locating physical evidence or remains nearly impossible in a short time frame. Despite hundreds of hours spent searching both on land and along the water's edge, investigators found no evidence related to Mark or Karen, no clothing, no personal items, and no traces indicating they had ever moved through the area. This outcome was attributed to three main factors. First, the area was too vast and complex to be fully covered in the initial phase. Second, if foul play was involved, the perpetrator likely chose a deeper, more concealed location or used conveyance methods that eliminated traces. Third, environmental conditions, wind, light rain, sandy soil, had erased surface signs before search teams could reach them. Ultimately, Lake Thunderbird and its adjacent areas were assessed as having extremely high potential for hiding evidence, and the lack of findings at this stage did not reduce suspicion, but instead reinforced the belief that the location may have been used as part of a forced journey leading to the victim's disappearance. By the end of 2006, after months of mobilizing search teams, analyzing phone data, reviewing cameras along the route, interviewing witnesses, and expanding the investigation to the Lake Thunderbird area, law enforcement was forced to conclude the initial phase of the Mark Ellison and Karen Holt missing persons investigation. All collected leads formed a chain of disjointed events, but were insufficient to pinpoint the victim's location, lacked evidence to arrest any suspect, and could not reconstruct the precise time or place where they were separated from the vehicle. Certain key facts, such as Diana Ellison's unusual gas can purchase, the final phone signal area near Lake Stanley Draper, and the Ford Taurus's off-route travel, suggested third-party intervention, but none were conclusive. The sudden reappearance of the car on I-40, with no signs of struggle or forced entry, combined with both phones being turned off simultaneously, further clarified that this was not a voluntary disappearance. However, investigators found no physical evidence whatsoever, no fibers, no biological traces, no personal belongings in the wooded areas, lake vicinity, dirt roads, or other suspected locations. The search effort stalled due to the enormous terrain, rapid environmental erasure of signs, and the absence of a comprehensive camera network along the route at that time. Many business cameras only retained footage for a few days, meaning any potentially critical images were permanently lost after the early investigation period. Witnesses either saw nothing or recalled only vague, unconfirmable details. Regarding suspects with motive, Diana Ellison remained in the high alert category, but no direct evidence proved she had followed Mark on the night of the disappearance. Gaps in her timeline were suspicious, but insufficient to establish legal grounds. Investigators also found no unusual financial transactions after the disappearance. No withdrawals, card use, or location data tied to Mark and Karen. All of this led to the conclusion that the case could not progress further in its current state. With no bodies, no physical evidence, and no precise witnesses, investigators had to accept that the file lacked the necessary anchors to pivot to a new direction. Therefore, by the end of 2006, the Mark Ellison and Karen Holt disappearance was officially reclassified as a cold case. Long-term archive status to be reopened only with new evidence, advanced forensic techniques, or breakthrough community information. The file was placed in the category of missing persons cases with suspected criminal involvement but insufficient evidence for conclusion. This status change closed the initial investigation phase, marking a near-total impasse for law enforcement in the face of a case filled with gaps and silence. In 2017, as the Oklahoma City Police Department launched a campaign to review long-standing unresolved cases over 10 years old, the Cold Case Unit was tasked with reassessing each file based on severity, potential for new evidence, and community impact. In an era when data analysis technology, signal retrieval, travel pattern matching, and imaging techniques had advanced dramatically since 2006, many previously stalled cases were prioritized for reevaluation. The Mark Ellison and Karen Holt disappearance file stood out from the earliest reviews due to its unusual characteristics: 2 adult victims vanishing simultaneously, a car abandoned in a location inconsistent with their route, simultaneous phone shutdowns, and especially the suspicion of foul play without physical evidence at the time. The 2006 summary revealed a consistent but fragmented chain of facts pointing toward criminal intervention while also clearly exposing the limitations of the original investigation, primarily the lack of precise cell site location technology, tools for enhancing low-resolution camera footage, and behavioral analysis from digital data. These factors led the Cold Case Unit to conclude that the Mark and Karen case had greater potential for breakthrough than many others lacking original data. Another key reason for prioritization was the case's enduring impact on the Edmond and Oklahoma City communities. The victims' families had contacted authorities repeatedly over more than a decade in hopes the case would not be forgotten, creating ongoing ethical pressure on investigators. The file's link to a suspect with clear motive, Diana Ellison, also raised its priority as cases with long-standing persons of interest but previously insufficient evidence are often reactivated when tracing technology improves. The Cold Case Unit began by digitizing the entire original file: photos, maps, phone signal data, witness statements, financial records, vehicle examination reports, Lake Thunderbird search logs, and all supporting documents. Digitization was not just for preservation, but to feed the data into 2017's new analysis systems, enabling journey simulation, reconstruction of final signal points, behavioral suspicion ranking, and most importantly, identification of previously unexamined geographic areas of interest. The goal of reactivation was not merely to review the case, but to overcome the constraints the 2006 investigation had been forced to accept. The biggest weakness of the original probe was the inability to connect disparate data points, a limitation that 2017 journey analysis algorithms and GIS systems could address. Additionally, the unit recognized that Diana Ellison's financial transaction and phone records could be reanalyzed more deeply with modern tools, particularly for time-based behavioral pattern matching. Upgrading CCTV image quality was also prioritized, as 2006 business cameras were low resolution, but original footage could still be enhanced to identify license plates, movement patterns, or the presence of a third vehicle. Finally, the file fit the profile of cold cases solvable after technological advancement: a clear travel route, specific suspected areas, a potential suspect, and strong likelihood of new evidence emerging through modern re-examination methods. The cold case unit officially added the Mark Ellison, Karen Holt file to its priority re-evaluation list in early summer 2017, opening a new investigative cycle with the hope that the gaps once responsible for the case's deadlock could now be filled by data and techniques that did not exist 10 years earlier. When the case file was reactivated in 2017, one of the most significant breakthroughs came from applying modern cell site analysis technology using signal triangulation, a technique that in 2006 was still very limited, capable only of estimating broad coverage areas spanning miles without determining direction of travel or relative device position. The cold case unit began by requesting the carrier to provide all archived raw data stored in their system, including automatic connection logs, antenna direction, signal strength, and metadata for each connection session. In 2006, this data existed but could not be fully analyzed due to a lack of processing algorithms. By 2017, digital spatial modeling techniques and signal vector analysis allowed the cold case unit to reconstruct a far more detailed travel path. The first step was applying the triangulation method, signal triangulation, to pinpoint the relative locations of Mark Ellison's and Karen Holt's phones within the 30 minutes after leaving Riverwind Casino. Modern algorithms analyzed signal strength variations between the nearest cell towers, combined with the sector angle to which the device connected, thereby generating a time-based movement map. The new analysis results matched the 2006 camera timestamps nearly perfectly. Mark's device last connected to a tower in the western Lake Stanley Draper area at 1 hour 41 minutes and 52 seconds a.m., while Karen's device lost signal just 4 seconds later. This allowed the cold case unit to determine that both phones were powered off or turned off within less than 10 seconds. An extremely important detail because it indicated simultaneous behavior, highly unlikely if the two had voluntarily turned off their phones or if only one had encountered an issue. Subsequent analysis focused on reconstructing the movement of Mark's device in the 20 minutes before signal loss. The 2017 data showed that the phone's connection path did not follow the usual I-35 route, but instead shifted to towers to the east, particularly the cluster along Douglas Boulevard. This aligned with camera footage that captured vehicle headlights heading east at 1:42 a.m. However, the most critical breakthrough did not come from the victim's two devices, but from the cold case unit's decision to reanalyze Diana Ellison's cell site data, something that in 2006 could not be effectively utilized due to overly limited technology. Once the court order was approved, the carrier provided the archived automatic signal records for Diana's phone from July 1 to July 10, 2006. This data had been reviewed before, but only at a raw level, unable to pinpoint the device's specific location. This time, using signal triangulation, investigators identified a notable sequence of data links on the night of July 6 into the early morning of July 7. Diana's phone, which she claimed in her statement had been at home the entire time from evening to morning, appeared in the coverage area of the SE 104th Street Tower, a location along the travel corridor from Lake Stanley Draper eastward, not far from where the Ford Taurus was found. Specifically, at 1:39 a.m., Diana's device automatically connected to this tower in the northwest-facing sector, indicating the phone was moving from the southeast area toward central Oklahoma County. 2 minutes later, at 1:41 a.m., strikingly coinciding with the exact moment Mark's and Karen's signals disappeared, Diana's phone pinged to a tower near I-40 in the South Hara direction. This was the tower cluster close to the abandoned vehicle location. Using signal strength measurement algorithms, the cold case unit determined that Diana's device had passed through an area only about 1.2 miles as the crow flies from the vehicle discovery point at the time of the central event. This directly contradicted her 2006 statement, in which Diana insisted she was at home and had not driven anywhere. The cold case unit continued using the cell site travel map to simulate the most likely route Diana's device could have taken. Triangulation data indicated the highest probability path was from Diana's home in Midwest City, along Douglas Boulevard toward the western Lake Stanley Draper area, heading toward the dirt road corridor connecting to I-40, finally appearing near the abandoned vehicle site. The timing from Diana's signal data showed her presence in the lake area at the same moment Mark's and Karen's devices simultaneously ceased activity, a match far too precise to be coincidental. Previously, when technology could only identify broad coverage zones, this alignment could not be detected. Now it became the single most important piece of evidence in the entire re-evaluation. The analysis team further simulated travel speed based on connection times between towers. The results showed Diana moving at speeds consistent with a personal vehicle, not remaining stationary at home as claimed. Even if the hypothesis that someone else used Diana's phone was considered, it still failed to explain why the device appeared precisely in the incident area at the exact time the victim's signals vanished, then continued moving back toward Midwest City, where Diana lived. Another factor that made the data even more compelling was that cell site analysis revealed Diana's device had no connection to the tower near her home from 12:30 a.m. until around 2 o'clock a.m., a complete gap directly contradicting her claim that she went to bed at midnight and did not leave the house. This was the first objective evidence, far beyond the subjective inferences possible in 2006, showing Diana was not at home during the time of the disappearance. The 2017 cell site analysis not only established deceptive behavior in Diana's statement, but for the first time placed her in the same time-space corridor as the two victims at the most critical moment. For the cold case unit, this was the true turning point. Technical data had surpassed all limitations of the technology from 11 years earlier, filling the largest gap in the case file and opening the possibility of identifying a suspect's movement pattern on the night of the crime, something nearly impossible in 2006. The 2017 technological advances also enabled the cold case unit to do something the 2006 investigators could not recover and enhance low-resolution video from the Riverwind Casino security system using AI image reconstruction technology. The original video segments, stored for over a decade, captured the final journey of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt. But at the time, they only showed a blurry silhouette of the silver Ford Taurus, while other surrounding vehicles remained unidentifiable. When the case was reactivated, the cold case unit's technical team downloaded all remaining original data from the system and fed it into next-generation image restoration software, a technology that uses deep learning models to reconstruct object structures, improve sharpness, and distinguish colors and details invisible to the naked eye. In the initial processing phase, the video was split into individual frames, after which the AI algorithm upscaled resolution layer by layer, sharpening vehicle contours by comparing them to millions of pre-trained motion and car structure samples. When the team restored the parking lot footage from approximately 1:18–1:24 a.m., they not only improved the image of Mark's vehicle but also detected the presence of another vehicle that had gone unnoticed in 2006, a dark-colored sedan appearing at the edge of the frame for a few seconds, moving slowly in the direction exiting the casino, only a few dozen meters from the Ford Taurus. To ensure accuracy, the technical team further enhanced the frames where the unknown vehicle appeared. AI processing clarified the overall shape, a slightly curved rear roofline, a shorter body length than the Ford Taurus, and near-square taillights. This led the analysis group to consider several common models from that era, including older Toyota Camry, 1998, 2002 Honda Accord, and certain Ford sedans. However, when the software reconstructed color tones, one standout detail emerged. The taillight cluster featured an elongated red strip and a small triangular bright point at the corner, a distinctive identifying feature of the 2000-2001 Toyota Camry LE. As soon as this detail surfaced, the cold case unit immediately cross-checked it against Diana Ellison's vehicle registration records from 2006. DMV records confirmed that Diana's car was indeed a 2001 Toyota Camry in dark green, with an Oklahoma plate registered in Midwest City. This was the first match between video and administrative data, a clue the 2006 investigation had completely missed due to the video's extreme blurriness. Next, the technical team searched for video from other camera angles in the parking lot, especially those near the casino exit. In another segment processed through AI, the Camry appeared more clearly, the body reflected overhead lights, with the dark paint highlighting silver trim along the door edges, a detail characteristic of the Camry LE model Diana drove. An even more critical detail emerged when AI increased contrast. The rear windshield displayed a small oval sticker, similar to a parking permit decal from her former workplace, as mentioned by her friends in the 2006 case file. When investigators re-verified photos of Diana's car from the divorce file, they confirmed this sticker was real and still present on the vehicle at that time. This greatly increased confidence that the vehicle appearing near the Ford Taurus at the casino was indeed Diana Ellison's. More importantly, the position and timing of Diana's vehicle appearance mattered. The video showed the Camry entering the parking area from the southeast, not stopping but slowly circling near where Mark and Karen left the casino. The vehicle last appeared in the footage at 1 hour 19 minutes and 48 seconds a.m., only about 1 minute before the camera captured Mark and Karen walking to their car and departing. When cross-referenced with cell site data analyzed via signal triangulation, the cold case unit found that Diana's vehicle appearance closely matched her phone, leaving the coverage area near her home around 1:10–1:15 a.m. This reinforced the hypothesis that Diana not only left home but was present near the casino at the precise time the two victims appeared in the parking lot. Investigators continued using AI-enhanced pattern tracking, a vector-based motion analysis technique, to determine whether the Camry followed a similar path to Mark's vehicle after leaving the casino. Although the casino camera system captured only portions of the route, AI reconstruction showed the Camry departing the area in the I-35 direction at nearly the same time and heading as the Taurus. By detecting taillight illumination changes, the AI system determined a motion match of over 80% between the two vehicles in the first 10 seconds, making random coincidence virtually impossible. Later, when cross-referencing the restored video with cameras at businesses along the route, the technical team uncovered another key indicator in a previously blurry 2006 video at the Telephone Road intersection. AI reconstructed the triangular taillight pattern on a vehicle following the Taurus by about 6–8 seconds, a detail the human eye could not distinguish back then, but was now clear. Thus, not only at the casino, but along the initial route, The presence of a Camry matching Diana's vehicle was established at 3 different camera points. The final part of the analysis focused on video from a business near Douglas Boulevard, a segment once so blurry it was nearly useless. When restored with AI, the footage showed a dark sedan following the Taurus eastward, separated by about 250 feet. After increasing contrast and applying image stabilization algorithms, technical experts confirmed contours matching Diana's Camry, including the front headlight recesses and rear logo position. For the first time in the entire case file, Diana's presence near the victims on the night they disappeared was proven with objective imagery rather than speculation. What in 2006 was meaningless blur now became crucial evidence. AI-enhanced video showed Diana tailing Mark and Karen from the casino all the way to the area near Lake Stanley Draper, where their phone signals simultaneously went dark. This discovery not only shattered Diana's entire 2006 statement, but also provided the first visual foundation for the hypothesis that she had deliberately followed them from the moment they left the casino. The recovery of video using AI technology, combined with cell site triangulation analysis and 2006 traffic maps, allowed the cold case unit for the first time to reconstruct Diana Ellison's travel itinerary on the night Mark Ellison and Karen Holt disappeared, a task previously considered impossible during the initial investigation phase. All data was arranged chronologically, starting from the moment Diana left her home in Midwest City until her device appeared near the location where the abandoned Ford Taurus was found. Based on cell site analysis, Diana's phone left the coverage area of the tower near her home around 1:15 a.m. The sector antenna direction analysis algorithm showed the device gradually moving from the Midwest City Tower to a tower near SE 29th Street, then continuing to ping to a tower south of Lake Stanley Draper not far away. This indicated that Diana had left home and driven south, completely contradicting her prior statement that she went to bed at midnight and did not leave the house. Based on traffic maps, the most logical route for this itinerary was from Diana's home Douglas Boulevard's secondary road connecting to the western area of Lake Draper. Analysis of casino video after AI-enhanced quality improvement showed Diana's Camry appearing in the Riverwind Casino parking lot at 1:19 a.m. and leaving the area almost immediately after Mark and Karen got into their vehicle and drove away. This created the first temporal anchor proving Diana had approached them at the casino and may have followed them from the starting point. When cross-referencing camera data along the route, the cold case unit identified 2 additional matching points. A blurry video segment in Moore captured the triangular taillights of a Camry following the Taurus by a few seconds, and a segment near Douglas Boulevard showed both vehicles traveling in the same eastward direction. When overlaying all this data onto traffic maps, the analysis team constructed a continuous itinerary. Both vehicles traveled on I-35 for the first few minutes, then exited the main route in the Moore area to head southeast, exactly the direction leading to the location where Mark and Karen's phone signals went dark simultaneously at 1:42 a.m. Cell site records showed Diana's signal pinging a tower at SE 104th Street at 1:39 a.m., with sector direction indicating the device was moving east-northwest, very close to the area where the victims were last confirmed to have signal. This was the first critical intersection point between the journeys of all 3. Triangulation data for Mark and Karen showed their phones ceased activity just seconds after Diana pinged the nearby tower. The timing match was so precise that it ruled out coincidence. As movement simulation continued, the GIS system analyzed position change rates between towers and showed Diana's device moving from the Lake Draper area down a land corridor toward I-40. Between 1:46–1:50 a.m., Diana's phone signal connected to a tower near Hera, precisely the coverage tower surrounding the location where the Ford Taurus was found. This enabled the cold case unit to build the highest probability travel route. Diana left the casino immediately after Mark and Karen, tailing them along I-35. Both vehicles exited the main route and moved into the Lake Draper area. 3. Mark and Karen lost signal right in the area where Diana appeared. 4. Diana continued moving alone toward I-40. The Taurus was abandoned shortly afterward within the coverage corridor of the tower. Diana pinged. A key detail was reinforced by interpolated GPS from cell site data. Diana's estimated speed when leaving the lake area and heading toward I-40 was higher than Mark's vehicle's earlier average speed, indicating that after the victims lost signal, Diana's journey returned to a fast, uninterrupted movement state, something unlikely if she were not alone in the vehicle. Observing the 2006 terrain maps, the analysis team noted that the dirt road segment connecting south of Lake Draper and the I-40 corridor was sufficiently secluded, poorly lit, and virtually without cameras, ideal for movement outside visual observation. This route was also the shortest path from the victim's last signal point to where the vehicle was found. When all data layers, recovered video, cell site triangulation, traffic maps and camera timestamps were combined, the cold case unit for the first time established a seamless itinerary for Diana, from leaving home to appearing in the geographic area directly related to the disappearance. More importantly, the data showed that Diana not only had opportunity, but actually traveled to the exact area where the victims were separated from their vehicle, at a time perfectly matching the incident window. This was the first breakthrough that transformed Diana from a high-alert suspect to one with clear location-based grounds, a position she had never been placed in during the 2006 investigation. One of the biggest limitations of the 2006 investigation was seizing Diana Ellison's vehicle, but being unable to effectively exploit soil, dust, and microscopic material samples adhering to the undercarriage due to the rudimentary forensic geological analysis technology at the time. When the case file was reactivated in 2017, the cold case unit requested re-examination of all stored physical evidence, including undercarriage samples, mud flaps and dust soil collected from the front wheel wells of Diana's Toyota Camry. These samples had previously been deemed worthless because they could not be precisely matched to the vast terrain of Oklahoma County. However, advances in micromineral analysis and geological spectral matching achieved far higher accuracy, allowing differentiation of soil between areas just a few hundred meters apart. Soil samples from Diana's vehicle were analyzed using Raman spectroscopy and FTIR infrared spectroscopy, identifying distinctive mineral composition, red soil rich in hematite, quartz sand phase, and a thin kaolinite clay layer. Notably, the sample contained very small mica particles with high light reflectivity, a mineral form appearing only in certain areas around Lake Thunderbird, where the parent rock weathered strongly during rainy seasons and emerged as sparkling surface particles. When compared to over 40 samples collected from suspect locations, the results showed significant matching with soil from the forested area south of Lake Thunderbird, an area more than a mile from the main road, sparsely trafficked, and previously assessed as potentially used to conceal evidence. The match was not only in mineral composition, but also in microstructural characteristics. Soil particles from Diana's vehicle exhibited a quartz-hematite ratio characteristic of the southern lake edge area, where soil often appears darker red due to iron oxide accumulation. Additionally, samples from the left front wheel axle showed gear tooth soil compression marks, a distinctive imprint pattern when a vehicle passes through semi-moist to semi-dry soil, compressing decayed leaf layers over underlying clay-mix soil, geological conditions matching the gentle slope leading from the forest down toward the water's edge at Lake Thunderbird. These findings forced the cold case unit to re-evaluate Diana's entire 2006 statement. She had then asserted that she did not leave Midwest City that night and did not drive to any red soil area, yet the soil on her vehicle carried clear evidence of travel into one of Oklahoma County's most distinctive geological zones, the red soil region of Lake Thunderbird, where even a few hundred meters of travel would deposit enough matching soil on the wheels To rule out coincidence, the examination team further tested soil samples from Diana's vehicle collected after July 7th to determine whether it could be from near her home. Soil taken from the Midwest City garage where Diana parked was completely different, urban gray soil rich in industrial ash and concrete fragments, lacking mica particles and virtually free of red hematite. This eliminated the possibility that the vehicle soil came from Diana's daily living area. Comparisons with other suspect areas, including Douglas Boulevard, Lake Stanley Draper vicinity, and the land corridor to I-40, also showed much lower match levels than the forested area south of Lake Thunderbird. In particular, soil from the vicinity of Mark and Karen's last phone signal had high quartz but low clay content, inconsistent with samples from Diana's vehicle. Only the South Lake Thunderbird soil achieved over 80% match in mineral analysis and nearly 95% in geochemical spectral analysis, rates nearly equivalent to direct site origin samples. This led to a critical conclusion. Around the time close to the victim's disappearance, Diana's vehicle not only traveled to the Lake Thunderbird area, but entered one of its most secluded remote locations where the terrain had high potential for concealing evidence or large objects. This was the first physical link between Diana's vehicle and an area previously evaluated as a possible crime scene location. It simultaneously reinforced the cell site and video movement data, showing Diana was not only present in the incident corridor, but stopped or moved into the forested Lake Thunderbird region, an investigative detail the 2006 investigation had never proven. As the 2017 technical evidence began forming a coherent chain, the cold case unit decided to proceed with the next step, re-reviewing all witnesses interviewed in 2006, including those who had provided seemingly vague or irrelevant information at the time. The primary motivation was experience from many long-term missing persons cases. Witnesses often misremember details shortly after an event due to time pressure and psychological factors, but can recall more accurately when supported by images, maps, and especially when no longer influenced by media speculation or community pressure. The cold case unit compiled a list of 27 witnesses, primarily residents around Lake Stanley Draper, night shift employees at stores along I-35 and I-240, and several drivers who had reported seeing abnormally parked vehicles but whose information was classified as no determined value in 2006. All were re-interviewed by the investigative team, this time using modern memory assistance protocols, detailed traffic maps, Google Earth satellite imagery, restored to 2006 terrain conditions, photographs of the forested area south of Lake Thunderbird, and 3D simulation illustrations of the two vehicles' travel routes on the night of the incident. This new process proved effective from the earliest sessions. A convenience store employee on Douglas Boulevard had stated in 2006 that he saw some vehicles driving unusually fast, but could not recall specifics. When shown nighttime simulation imagery and the projected route Mark and Karen's vehicle would have taken, he began recalling more clearly. Sometime after 1:30 a.m., he heard loud engines, sounding like two vehicles following each other on the quiet stretch. Though unable to describe the exact vehicle types, the witness confirmed the rear vehicle was dark-colored, and this was the first time he was certain of that detail. While only a small addition, it aligned with AI-recovered video data showing Diana's dark Camry following Mark's Taurus. Another witness, living near the entrance to the dirt road south of Lake Thunderbird, had stated in 2006 that she heard a slow-moving vehicle around 2 a.m. but could not see clearly due to darkness, and her house being about 200 meters from the road. That statement was then deemed unreliable due to lack of precise timing. Now, shown simulated route maps and hearing simulated engine sounds on the area's characteristic dirt background, she affirmed the timing as right after 1:40, matching the cell site timeframe when Mark and Karen's phones lost signal. She added a detail never previously mentioned. She believed it was not one but two different engines, the first smaller, the second larger and heavier, like a vehicle moving slowly on dirt then accelerating on open road. Though she could not see the vehicles, the information about two distinct engine sounds significantly matched cell site simulation data, showing Diana leaving the lake area before Mark and Karen's phones went fully offline. However, the most pivotal witness emerged in the ninth session. A middle-aged man who had lived near a small intersection connecting the southern forest to the main road, who in 2006 only reported hearing dogs barking and seeing distant vehicle headlights. When shown restored satellite imagery and positioning maps of suspect locations, his memory sharpened. He recalled that around 2 a.m. on July 7th, he saw not one but two human figures walking along the dirt path into the forest, about 100+ meters from his house. He could not identify them, but remembered one standing near a dark-colored vehicle with the engine running, while the other stood farther back in the tree shadows. When asked why he had not reported this in 2006, the witness explained he was unsure of what he saw and feared causing legal trouble without clear evidence. However, with 2017 simulated light direction maps, he confirmed the light he saw matched Camry headlights, distinctive in height and pattern. More importantly, he added a detail the cold case unit deemed especially valuable. He recalled the dark vehicle was not a camper or pickup, as he had initially thought, but possibly a four-door sedan, with the front facing outward toward the main road, rather than into the forest. This fully aligned with post-incident departure behavior simulated from Diana's cell site data. The most notable aspect of this supplemental testimony was the appearance of two people, a detail never recorded in any 2006 report. The investigative team could not identify who the two figures were, but their presence on the dirt road at the critical time window opened the possibility that the victims had not yet been separated from the vehicle at that location, but may have been taken deeper into the forest or moved to another site before the Taurus was abandoned. With this new detail, the cold case unit officially re-evaluated all hypotheses related to events at the Southern Lake Thunderbird forest scene. As technical evidence and supplemental witness statements began to converge in the same direction, the cold case unit proceeded with the final analysis step before making a strategic decision, evaluating the behavioral profile of suspect Diana Ellison to determine her degree of fit with characteristic offending patterns in missing persons cases involving personal motives. The behavioral assessment drew not only from the 2006 investigative data, but also synthesized the entire history of interactions between Diana and Mark Ellison prior to their divorce. Post-divorce emotional changes, escalating events occurring between 2004-2006, and her prolonged controlling behaviors toward Mark, as well as those closely associated with him, including Karen Holt. First, the behavioral experts reviewed descriptions of the final phase of the marriage between Diana and Mark. Numerous documents in the divorce file showed that Diana frequently exhibited strong controlling tendencies, checking Mark's work schedule, making repeated calls requiring him to report his location, and viewing any of Mark's social relationships as threats to the family. These behaviors continued after the divorce, especially once Mark began a relationship with Karen. Messages and notes preserved in the 2006 file showed Diana frequently expressing anger, claiming Mark had betrayed the family and that Karen had ruined her life. This represented an emotional escalation pattern consistent with the behavior of individuals displaying extreme attachment tendencies in personally motivated cases. Next, the cold case unit examined the abnormal communication pattern Diana had with Mark and Karen. 2006 phone data revealed that Diana called Mark's number hundreds of times in the months leading up to his disappearance. Despite a low answer rate, the persistent late-night calling frequency was regarded as an indicator of intrusive behavior, a common factor in cases where the suspect attempts to maintain influence or control over the victim despite boundaries. Behavioral experts characterized this as a spiral escalation cycle in which jealousy combined with a sense of lost ownership leads to intensified surveillance, harassment, or stalking. Another factor considered was the possibility that Diana engaged in pre-offense preparation. Financial data from 2006, reanalyzed in 2017, showed that Diana purchased 2 cans of gasoline shortly before the night of the disappearance, with no reasonable explanation for using such a quantity in daily activities. Purchasing reserve fuel is often a sign of preparation for a long trip without stopping at gas stations, an action consistent with data placing Diana near the casino and later near the location where Mark's abandoned vehicle was found. When placed within the behavioral pattern, experts identified this as covert, non-impulsive preparation, indicating the suspect had planned and calculated to avoid capture by traffic cameras. Diana's behavioral profile also included events demonstrating escalation of hostile attitude. Mark's friends reported that Diana repeatedly expressed the idea that Mark will have to pay, while one of Diana's relatives described her frequently mentioning that Mark had ruined her life and could be punished. Although these statements in 2006 lack sufficient legal weight, in the 2017 behavioral analysis, they clearly reflected emotional drivers, feelings of loss, abandonment, jealousy, and a desire to reassert control. When all of this was placed within criminological models of missing persons cases involving family members or former partners, the cold case unit determined that Diana matched 3 primary behavioral indicators: 1, strong personal motive centered on relationship breakdown; 2, a history of prolonged control and harassment; 3, calculated pre-incident preparatory behavior. Based on cell site and video data, Diana had followed Mark and Karen from the casino and approached them at the point when the victims lost signal. This direct stalking behavior fit the pre-planned coercive approach pattern commonly seen in abductions or assaults with emotional components. Finally, the cold case unit considered the possibility that Diana acted alone. Data showed that her vehicle's route, speed, and movement pattern bore no signs of group travel or multiple vehicles. Although a new witness reported seeing 2 figures on the dirt road, behavioral analysis suggested this could result from low-light conditions or the presence of the victim during a controlled phase, rather than necessarily indicating multiple suspects. After cross-referencing all behavioral indicators, the cold case unit concluded that Diana not only had motive, but also exhibited a psychological pattern consistent with serious personally motivated disappearances, wounded emotional drive, jealousy outbursts, stalking behavior, and preparation of means to approach the victims undetected. Moreover, Diana's chain of escalating behaviors leading up to the disappearance, from fear of replacement to anger and a desire to punish, was identified as the central factor, placing her in the highest risk suspect category in the file. Once the behavioral analysis established Diana Ellison as the highest risk suspect, the cold case unit moved to the decision phase, synthesizing all technical evidence, witness testimony, and spatio-temporal data to build a probable cause affidavit for an arrest warrant. To avoid errors and meet legal requirements, the investigative team divided the evidence chain into 4 main groups: location data, image data, geological evidence, and behavioral motive profile. The location data group played the most critical role because, for the first time in over a decade, cell tower triangulation technology pinpointed Diana's phone in the crime corridor during the exact window of the victim's disappearance. Cell site data confirmed Diana left her home shortly after 1 a.m., was present near Riverwind Casino at 1:19, appeared close to the last signal location of Mark and Karen at 1:39, 1:41, and pinged a tower near the abandoned Taurus just minutes later. This movement sequence seamlessly matched the victim's journey, showing Diana had closely followed and approached them. The image data group, enhanced through AI recovery, further strengthened the chain. Diana's dark Toyota Camry was identified in the casino parking lot immediately before and after Mark and Karen departed, then appeared on 2 cameras along I-35 and 1 near Douglas Boulevard. Tail light configuration, paint color, and rear window sticker matched so precisely as to rule out misidentification. Notably, AI confirmed the Camry's motion pattern matched over 80%, with the tailing vehicle departing the casino, a detail 2006 technology could not capture. The Geological Evidence Group provided the strongest physical link between Diana and the suspected site. Soil samples from the Camry, seized in 2006, matched almost perfectly with soil from the forested area south of Lake Thunderbird, including hematite mineral ratios, reflective mica, and clay loam soil structure, features absent from the area where Diana resided. The presence of soil characteristic of a remote location, assessed as a potential evidence concealment site on her vehicle, formed a crucial link in the case. The final group, the behavioral motive profile, served to reinforce the plausibility of the entire action sequence. The cold case unit presented Diana's history of control, jealousy, stalking and harassment toward Mark, along with the pre-disappearance gasoline purchase, demonstrating motive, preparatory capability, and a behavioral pattern consistent with crime stemming from personal relationship breakdown. When all data layers were overlaid on the GIS system, a coherent spatio-temporal sequence emerged. 1:10, 1:15 Diana left home, 1:19 appeared near the casino, 1:30, 1:40 followed Mark and Karen along the return route. 1:41, 1:42 victims lost signal in the lake area. 1:46, 1:50 Diana appeared in the I-40 corridor where the Taurus was abandoned. The cold case unit assessed this as a continuous, synchronized, and precisely timed sequence too accurate to be coincidental. This satisfied the requirement of crime commission along a supported timeline, a key criterion for seeking an arrest warrant. Once the affidavit was complete, investigators presented the full package to the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office. In an official report exceeding 70 pages, the team argued that Diana not only appeared at every key location, but was likely the only individual with direct personal motive and signs of pre-planning. The report emphasized that no evidence contradicted the possibility of Diana approaching the victims at the moment they vanished. The DA's legal counsel reviewed the file against three criteria: linkage of technical evidence, behavioral plausibility within criminological models, and probability of sequential conduct. All three met the threshold. Ultimately, based on the unified evidence chain, the Oklahoma County District Attorney signed an arrest warrant for Diana Ellison on charges directly related to the disappearance of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt. The warrant was approved in late 2017, more than 11 years after the night the two victims vanished, marking a pivotal transition from a prolonged cold case to a clearly directed criminal investigation. Immediately after the warrant was executed, Diana Ellison was brought into the cold case unit's interview room, where investigators had prepared a completely different approach strategy from 2006. This time, they relied on technical data, spatio-temporal sequence, and scientific evidence that Diana could not easily deny as before. The session began with familiar questions about the night of July 6 into the early morning of July 7, 2006, to establish the suspect's psychological baseline and test memory consistency. But investigators quickly shifted to direct confrontation between her prior statements and newly obtained data. Diana repeated her assertion that she was home all night, went to bed at midnight, and never drove anywhere, just as she had claimed over a decade earlier. This time, however, the team did not stop at documentation. They immediately presented the cell site analysis showing her phone left the coverage area of the tower near her home around 1:12 a.m. When Diana responded by saying she didn't understand why the phone appeared elsewhere, investigators added triangulation data detailing direction of travel, speed, and changing distances between towers. A highly technical form of evidence Diana could not explain away with claims of dropped calls or lost signal. Instability began to show in her reactions when investigators asked about the dark Toyota Camry appearing in casino video, now AI-enhanced to display matching features: square cluster taillights, oval rear window sticker, and chrome trim along the door edge. Diana evaded, claiming there are hundreds of Camrys like that. But investigators countered by presenting enlarged comparison photos of each detail and stating that only Diana's vehicle in DMV records shared the same taillight assembly, paint color, and sticker placement. When asked why her car appeared in the casino lot at the same time Mark and Karen left, Diana changed her statement for the first time. She said that maybe that night I drove out for a bit to get some air, a claim completely contradictory to her prior account and signaling a shift to a defensive posture. Investigators pressed with timestamps. 1:19 her vehicle appeared near the casino exit. 1:30 dark headlights were recorded by a Moore roadway camera tailing the Taurus. 1:39 Diana's phone pinged the SE 104th Street Tower near the victim's last signal. Diana attempted to explain that maybe someone else drove my car, but when asked who had keys and whether anyone borrowed the vehicle that night, she could provide no name or specific evidence, causing her argument to collapse on the spot. When the interview turned to geological evidence, investigators placed the soil analysis report in front of Diana, showing samples from her vehicle's undercarriage matched almost perfectly with soil from the forested area south of Lake Thunderbird, a location not on any of her routine travel routes. Diana initially refused to answer, then said she might have driven through there a few weeks earlier, but the technical report noted the soil's compaction and moisture levels corresponded to early July 2006, not dry or weathered soil over time. Confronted with a map showing geographic alignment between the soil sample site and the victim's final signal area, Diana closed her eyes for several seconds, and reaction investigators noted as a characteristic emotional response when a suspect realizes their account no longer holds plausibility. This psychological shift intensified when investigators referenced supplemental witness testimony from someone living near the dirt road entrance who saw two figures near a dark-colored vehicle with its engine running during the exact window of the victim's disappearance. Diana immediately denied ever going to that forest, but when asked if she could explain why someone saw her car in that area, she remained silent for over 20 seconds before saying, "Maybe they were mistaken." This was the third time she invoked mistaken identity, each tied to a different form of evidence, phone, video, and soil, indicating her defensive strategy was beginning to fracture. In the later portion of the session, investigators presented a consolidated timeline listing minute-by-minute events from Diana leaving home to appearing near the abandoned vehicle. Diana began shifting her framing. Instead of firm denials, she moved to statements such as, "I don't remember clearly, it was so long ago, I'm not sure what I did, and maybe I went out and came back." This marked a clear transition from absolute denial to vagueness, commonly seen when a suspect realizes every timestamp is corroborated by objective data. When asked to explain the purchase of 2 cans of gasoline before the disappearance night, an action viewed as preparatory, Diana said she bought them for an acquaintance, but could not recall the person's name. Investigators immediately countered that in 11 years, you never mentioned this acquaintance, forcing Diana into a passive position and prompting self-adjustment. "Maybe I got the date wrong." These repeated changes in her account were fully documented to demonstrate inconsistency. The interview lasted over 4 hours, with the most noticeable change occurring in Diana's tone and sentence structure, from confident assertions to roundabout explanations, question avoidance, and ultimately, an admission that there are many things I can't recall accurately. The cold case unit recorded that each time technical evidence was introduced, Diana did not rebut with data, but only with emotion or skepticism, offering no reasonable alternative explanation. This looseness became especially evident when investigators asked, "Do you have any reason to have been at the casino at the same time Mark and Karen left?" Diana looked down at the table, clenched her hands and said, "I have no reason, and I don't remember whether I was there or not." This was the first time she did not directly deny presence at the casino. The interview concluded with investigators noting that Diana could no longer maintain consistency with her original statements, and her psychological responses, including avoidance, vacillation, and adjustment of her account in response to each piece of evidence, showed she was strongly affected by confrontation with new proof, while displaying classic signs of a suspect cornered with no rational explanation for a fully reconstructed sequence of events. After many hours of continuous interrogation and relentless confrontation with new technical data, Diana Ellison began to show clear signs of psychological wavering. Her answers lost consistency, her tone became subdued, and her eyes could no longer maintain the control they had at the start of the session. When the investigator shifted from a confrontation strategy to an opening strategy, emphasizing that more than 11 years have passed, and the truth, no matter how heavy, needs to be brought to light, Diana remained silent for a very long time, then for the first time uttered the words, "I know what you guys think happened, and there are things I've kept for too long." This was a psychological indicator that the suspect was preparing to provide information she had previously deliberately concealed. When the investigator gently asked if she wanted to talk about where Mark and Karen were taken after their phone signals cut off, Diana closed her eyes for a few seconds and then said, "I didn't intend for things to go this far, but I do know a place." This statement, though vague, marked the first turning point in accessing information about the burial location, a fact that had eluded everyone for over a decade. Under the explanation that her information would be recorded verbatim and evaluated for feasibility based on terrain evidence, Diana began describing the location in a disjointed but sufficient manner for the investigators to recognize it was not an immediately fabricated area. She stated that the place was south of a large lake, had many low oak trees, and had a small dirt path that could only be seen at night because during the day the leaves cover it. When asked about the shape of the site, Diana added that the area had a sunken patch of ground, like a shallow bowl, and that there were small white rocks scattered along the edge of the path. These details immediately caught the investigators' attention, as white rocks are very rare around Oklahoma County and particularly concentrated in a few areas along the southern edge of Lake Thunderbird, the same area where soil samples from Diana's car had previously matched. When asked to specify the approach direction to the site, Diana said she had come in from the dirt road on the west, then turned left as soon as I saw a topped-off tree, and proceeded about a distance long enough that the car would have trouble turning around. The investigators cross-referenced this description with the 2006 terrain map and found that the southern area of Lake Thunderbird had a trail leading to a natural depression between low mounds, along with a large oak tree struck by lightning and broken at the top in 2004. An unexpectedly precise match with Diana's description. To test consistency, the investigator asked Diana to describe the soil conditions at the site. She replied that the soil was red and somewhat moist because it's near the water's edge, and that when stepping down shoes easily pick up a thin layer of clay mud. This was precisely the geological characteristic that created the distinctive soil sample analyzed from the undercarriage of the Camry. Diana also added that the area had no houses nearby, and at night it was very dark, making it nearly impossible to hear noises or see passers-by unless standing very close. When the investigator asked directly, "Is that where Mark and Karen were taken?" Diana did not answer directly, but only said, "If you find the right spot, you'll know." Though not a full admission, this represented the highest level of cooperation since the start of the interrogation. To verify feasibility, the investigation team showed Diana a 2006 satellite map of the Lake Thunderbird area, restored to the water level at that time, and asked her to mark the location. After some hesitation, Diana placed her finger on the southern area, near an unnamed dirt road connecting to 108th Avenue, more than 2 miles from the area searched in 2006. When asked to describe additional landmarks, Diana mentioned a blackened tree stump, a parallel trail to the dirt road, and a flat rock that looks like someone propped it up. Notably, the 2006 ground search record showed that the team had never approached the area she indicated, because the unusually low lake water level at the time had caused the terrain simulation map to be inaccurate, leading them to prioritize the eastern area instead of the southern one. To check the degree of match between her statement and actual terrain, investigators used GIS tools to compare the location Diana marked with mineral maps and archived satellite imagery. The system confirmed that the indicated area fell precisely within the dark red band of hematite soil, the type that matched only the sample collected from Diana's vehicle. At the same time, satellite imagery also showed a natural depression of a size consistent with her description. This level of correspondence was sufficient to assess her statement as having high credibility. When further asked about how she approached the area on the night of the incident, Diana described that just turning off the car lights for a few minutes, no one could see, and that dirt road was usually deserted at night. Although she did not admit her role in the crime, she accurately described the area's light structure, which had been verified during the 2017 terrain survey. After completing the description, the investigator repeated all the information Diana had just provided to check for consistency. She did not deny any detail, although she maintained that she didn't remember everything clearly and didn't want to say more. However, Diana's reaction, particularly her surrender while describing the location, with no further rebuttal or denial, showed she was fully aware that the information she provided could lead to the discovery of actual evidence. The cold case unit assessed Diana's statement as highly feasible as it matched real terrain, geological data, cell site information, and reconstructed movement direction. That same day, the investigation team officially added the location Diana described to the priority survey list, marking the shift from confrontational investigation to targeted field investigation for confirmation. Immediately after Diana Ellison provided a detailed description of the burial site, the cold case unit promptly coordinated with the Oklahoma State Forensic Team, the specialized K-9 search unit, and the Terrain Survey Group to launch a controlled excavation campaign in the southern area of Lake Thunderbird. Due to the dense forest terrain and narrow dirt roads, the forensic convoy had to access the area using high-clearance vehicles and nighttime lighting equipment. The point Diana marked on the map was pre-marked with GPS, after which the search team established a 200-meter radius around the geological depression she described. At sunrise, the survey team began checking each terrain feature to match her statement. A lightning-charred black oak stump from around 2004 still stood right at the forest edge, a faint parallel trail to the dirt road, retained old vehicle compression marks, and numerous small white rocks were scattered exactly as described, like someone propped them up. All matched the information Diana provided during interrogation, elevating the area to top priority. The forensic team employed soil layer surveying methods before using shovels or mechanical tools to ensure no evidence damage. The red hematite-rich soil layers were cut into strips, photographed, and numbered. Within about an hour, one of the technicians detected an anomaly. The upper soil layer showed different color and compaction compared to surrounding layers, indicating prior artificial disturbance. Metal detectors and geological probes were inserted into this area, recording unusual voids beneath the surface. An excavation pit order was immediately issued. The first soil layer was removed in an arc pattern to avoid direct impact on the suspected center. Within minutes, the forensic team discovered a fragment of decayed fabric, color difficult to determine, but with a weave structure similar to polyester, located about 30–40 centimeters deep. Right beside it, a small bone fragment, identified as a metacarpal, was found, sending shock through the entire team. The discovery of biological evidence prompted expansion of the excavation area by an additional 1.5 meters in all directions to avoid missing remains. As they dug into the third soil layer, the forensic team officially identified human remains, pelvic bones and long bones, positioned in a manner consistent with bodies buried in a crouched position, a common sign in hasty burials. Technicians continued expanding the area and discovered another set including a skull and lower jaw about half a meter away, consistent with soil displacement over many years. A second set of remains was also found deeper in the soil layer, confirming the presence of two victims as initially suspected. The entire area was marked with forensic stakes, covered with grid netting, and photographed in 360 degrees for scene reconstruction. As excavation continued, the forensic team discovered two key pieces of evidence: a metal earring still intact, highly likely belonging to Karen Holt based on family description, and a small plastic fragment suspected to be part of a flashlight or handheld light casing. There were also traces of decayed dark-colored clothing fabric, along with 3 decomposed rubber fragments, possibly from shoe soles. These items were collected per standard protocol, sealed, and transferred to the lab for DNA analysis, material composition, and decomposition level to determine burial timeframe. Concurrently, the scene was documented using handheld LiDAR scanning to record soil structure, body positions, and evidence locations, creating a 3D map for cross-referencing movement behavior on the night of the incident. Vehicle compression marks on the old soil layer were also recorded using soil contrast enhancement technology, identifying tire tracks matching the axle width of a 2001 Toyota Camry, the vehicle Diana used. This formed another crucial link connecting the suspect vehicle to the scene. The investigation team also noted signs that the bodies were buried with crude tools, uneven soil cuts, angled digging, and a hastily refilled top layer. Some tree roots penetrating the burial area indicated the site had remained undisturbed for at least over a decade, consistent with the victim's disappearance in 2006. Once all remains were collected, the forensic team conducted on-site sorting to confirm bone count and relative positions, while collecting additional soil samples adhering to the bones for chemical analysis to determine burial environmental conditions. The match between the location revealed by Diana, soil samples, cell site data, and video led the cold case unit to conclude that this was indeed where the 2 victims were taken after going missing. The discovery of the bodies in terrain conditions fully consistent with the suspect's description and prior technical evidence marked a major turning point, officially elevating the case from speculation to one with direct physical evidence, paving the way for subsequent legal proceedings. The successful excavation of the 2 victims' remains marked the transition to the forensic examination phase to determine cause of death, extent of injuries, and timing of trauma, thereby cross-referencing with the case timeline and Diana Ellison's statements. Immediately after collecting all bones and remaining tissue samples, the forensic team transferred them to the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Center for Systematic Examination per standard protocol in long-term missing persons cases. The first step was cleaning the bones using enzymatic methods to remove soil, roots, and long-term adhesions, ensuring clear observation of bone surfaces. Once the final soil patches were washed away, the skeletal structures of both victims became clearer. Mark Ellison's skeleton was about 85% complete, while Karen Holt's was about 78%, with clear fragmentation in the ribs and forearm bones due to environmental exposure and soil pressure over more than a decade. Nevertheless, key parts for trauma analysis, the skull, long bones, ribs, and vertebrae, remained sufficiently intact to determine cause of death. Examination of Mark's skull revealed 2 long diagonal fractures originating from the left temporal region and extending toward the eye socket. The fracture pattern was consistent with heavy blunt force from an object with a narrow edge, most likely a metal rod or tool handle. The temporal bone also showed a depression, indicating a strong direct impact that occurred while the victim was alive or immediately before complete loss of consciousness. For Karen, the skull had a large crack in the occipital region, extending down to the base of the skull, an injury commonly seen in rear attacks. This suggested the 2 victims did not sustain identical injuries, but may have been attacked in different circumstances, yet both suffered heavy blunt force. Continuing with the rib cage, the forensic team found multiple unhealed fractures on Mark's skeleton, particularly ribs 4, 5, and 7 on the right side. The sharp fracture lines with no callus formation proved the victim died shortly after the trauma. For Karen, the left ribs showed 3 fracture points, with fracture direction indicating force from the front or left side, consistent with being pushed down or struck with a heavy object. Injuries to the long bones were also recorded. Mark's right humerus had a spiral fracture pattern, indicative of raising an arm to shield the head in a defensive reflex. Karen also had minor fractures in the ulna and radius, showing she attempted to raise her arms in defense. These details confirmed both were caught off guard, but had a brief period of resistance before collapsing. The examiners also analyzed remaining soft tissue samples in the soil adjacent to the bodies. Although most tissue had decomposed, some clotted protein traces indicated massive hemorrhage at the time of death. Soil samples directly beneath Mark's skull showed higher than average iron content, consistent with blood seeping into the ground from a head injury. To determine the relative timing of the injuries, the forensic team performed microanalysis on fracture edges. Results showed sharp, uneroded edges without natural enzymatic wear, proving the injuries occurred immediately before death. There were no post-mortem impact signs, meaning the bodies were not further damaged during burial or transport. This reinforced the conclusion that the two victims were killed at or near the discovery site or attacked shortly before being brought there. Cross-referencing the forensic results with cell site and video timing data showed significant alignment. The injuries fit an attack occurring within a few minutes before their phone signals cut off at 1:41–1:42 a.m. This also explained the absence of any emergency calls. The victims had no opportunity to use their mobile devices. The examiners considered weapon use, but since no hard object was buried with the bodies, they could only conclude the weapon was most likely a heavy blunt object, handheld with one hand, delivering concentrated force over a small area. This aligned with Mark's head trauma report and Karen's occipital crack. Analysis of injury severity determined that Mark was struck at least twice to the head and at least once heavily to the chest, causing rib fractures. Karen sustained at least 2 major head injuries and 3 chest or arm injuries during defense. This indicated the perpetrator intended to decisively eliminate both victims' ability to resist. Finally, the forensic team compared the injuries with Diana's vague statements during interrogations. Although she did not directly admit to the assault, her accurate description of the location and lack of objection when asked about pushing or struggling showed she clearly understood what happened there. The autopsy and trauma analysis results reinforced a consistent timeline. Mark and Karen were attacked almost immediately after leaving the last signal area, struck with blunt objects, quickly lost the ability to resist, and died from head trauma combined with respiratory failure due to chest injuries. When combined with other evidence, cell site data, video, soil samples and statements, this advanced the investigation significantly, strengthening the entire accusatory framework and clarifying the cause of death that had been concealed for over 11 years. After completing the autopsy and analyzing all physical evidence, the cold case unit entered the critical phase, reconstructing a seamless sequence of events in the case. From the moment Mark Ellison and Karen Holt left Riverwind Casino until their bodies were buried in the wooded area south of Lake Thunderbird. The synthesis had to be based entirely on objective data, cell site records, video footage, geological evidence, witness statements, and forensic examinations to create an accurate narrative capable of withstanding any challenge. The report begins with the timestamp of 1:18 a.m. on July 7, 2006. When casino cameras captured Mark and Karen leaving the gaming floor. Less than a minute later, AI-enhanced recovered footage shows a dark-colored Toyota Camry, matching Diana's vehicle, moving slowly in the same parking area. As the two victims walked to their car and prepared to leave the casino, the Camry reappeared in frame, maintaining a distance of no more than 30–40 meters behind them. Between 1:20–1:30 a.m., both vehicles exited the casino heading toward I-35. Roadside cameras along the route captured the light pattern and movement of a dark sedan tailing Mark's Ford Taurus. AI-recovered video showed over 80% similarity between the taillights of Diana's vehicle and those of the trailing car in the grainy 2006 footage. From 1:30 to 1:39 a.m. Cell site data confirmed Diana's phone moving through sectors overlapping the expected route Mark and Karen would take. During this period, both victims' phones continued to ping consistently to towers near Lake Stanley Draper, indicating they were on their normal route home. The 1:39 a.m. mark was the turning point. Diana's phone pinged a tower at SE 104th Street, a cluster of towers adjacent to the corridor leading into the wooded area south of Lake Thunderbird, before Mark and Karen's phones lost connection. This indicated Diana had either moved ahead of them or positioned herself advantageously to intercept. By 1:42 a.m., both victims' signals went dark simultaneously, consistent with the moment they were attacked and rendered unable to use their devices. Forensic examination determined the injuries occurred within a very short time frame, consistent with blunt force trauma focused on the head and chest. Defensive wounds on the forearms and hands showed Mark and Karen were taken by surprise, quickly subdued, and rendered unconscious almost immediately. From 1:42 to 1:50 a.m., Diana's phone moved out of the wooded area, pinging towers near I-40, matching the location where Mark's Ford Taurus was later abandoned. Soil samples from Diana's Camry matched 95% with the soil at the body recovery site, confirming her vehicle had entered the exact location she described during questioning. This evidence reinforced the scenario that Diana transported Mark and Karen's bodies deeper into the woods via a discreet trail, then buried them in a hastily dug shallow grave. Bone examination revealed no signs of post-mortem disturbance, proving the bodies were buried immediately after the attack without prolonged transport. A 2006 witness, now corroborated by maps and simulations, confirmed seeing two figures near a dark-colored vehicle on a dirt road around the time the victims lost signal. This was a crucial match, strengthening the hypothesis that Diana not only followed, but directly approached and overpowered the victims. The estimated time from the attack to Diana's departure from the area was approximately 10-12 minutes, sufficient for the violent act, superficial burial, and leaving the scene undetected, given the dark, remote terrain at pre-dawn. The complete investigative report presents the sequence as a tightly linked structure. Video proves Diana's presence at the casino and along the route. Cell site data proves her path overlapped the attack corridor. Soil evidence proves her vehicle entered the burial site. Autopsy confirms the mechanism of death aligned with the phone signal. Cutoff. Witnesses add detail about the vehicle and strangers' presence on the dirt road. And Diana's own statements, while not a direct admission, describe the location with precision that could not stem from vague, innocent recollection. Taken together, the data forms a complete time-space continuum. Diana left home, approached the casino, followed Mark and Karen, intercepted them near the lake, attacked and concealed the bodies, then exited via a dirt path to I-40, abandoning Mark's car to stage a false scene. The investigative report concludes, independent evidence markers converged into a logical whole, with no internal contradictions, and consistent with a pattern of offending driven by deep personal motive. This is the most comprehensive reconstruction since the crime occurred, moving the investigation from hypothesis to a fully proven framework, ready for the next prosecutorial phase. After the cold case unit finalized the event reconstruction report and transferred the entire file to the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office, the formal prosecution phase began with a comprehensive review of each layer of evidence to determine its sufficiency, legality, and ability to withstand courtroom scrutiny. The lead prosecutor and legal team re-examined every category: cell site data proving the journey, AI recovered video showing Diana's vehicle at the casino and along the route, geological evidence matching the burial site, autopsy determining cause of death, witness statements corroborating approach behavior, and Diana's own description of the body disposal location. The convergence of multiple independent evidence types into one consistent logical sequence was the key factor leading prosecutors to conclude the file met the clear and convincing threshold for charging. In addition to sufficiency, prosecutors verified the legality of evidence collection, particularly for newer technologies, AI video enhancement, reanalysis of 2006 archived cell site data, and re-examination of soil samples. All steps followed current protocols, with court orders and chain of custody documentation, ensuring no procedural violations. Prosecutors also weighed Diana's statements. Although she did not admit to the crime, her precise description of the body location was regarded as information only the directly involved person could know, thereby increasing the inculpatory weight. Based on the holistic analysis, prosecutors compiled the applicable charges. The core offense was first-degree murder for both Mark Ellison and Karen Holt, based on elements of premeditation, personal motive, prior preparation, and commission under circumstances clearly dangerous to human life. Additionally, prosecutors considered first-degree kidnapping, as both victims were deprived of liberty before being killed, tampering with evidence, specifically burying the bodies to conceal the crime, and staging a scene, demonstrated by abandoning Mark's car in a location unrelated to their normal travel route. While these additional charges were secondary to the two first-degree murder counts, they formed a comprehensive legal framework fully describing Diana's conduct under Oklahoma criminal statutes. After determining charges, prosecutors prepared the case for trial, a process requiring close coordination between the legal team and investigators. All technical evidence was reorganized chronologically for courtroom presentation as a logical chain, from the victim's departure from the casino to the discovery of the bodies. In particular, prosecutors built an exhibit timeline, a visual time, space sequence, including recovered video, cell site triangulation maps, geological maps, excavation site photos, and injury diagrams. The goal was to enable the jury to easily visualize the entire crime sequence and recognize the tight alignment among independent evidence sources. Prosecutors also prepared a witness list, including the lead investigator, cell site expert, AI video analysis expert, geologist, forensic pathologist, the witness who saw the vehicle on the dirt road, and individuals who could clarify Diana's behavioral history. Regarding the suspect's statements, prosecutors chose a focused presentation strategy, avoiding emphasis on her denials, and instead highlighting the information she provided that directly led to locating the bodies, treating it as indirect evidence of involvement. Concurrently, the DA's office prepared anticipated rebuttals to likely defense strategies, such as claims of faulty memory, technological error, or coincidental cell site presence. Given the multi-layered mutually reinforcing evidence, prosecutors were confident these challenges could not undermine the inculpatory structure. Once all components, technical evidence, witness testimony, behavioral analysis, and forensic results, were finalized, prosecutors formally filed the information in district court, seeking to bring Diana Ellison to trial on first-degree murder charges for both victims, plus related offenses. This was the decisive transition, moving the case from a cold case spanning over a decade to full criminal prosecution, paving the way for trial before a jury. The trial of Diana Ellison took place in Oklahoma County District Court, amid weeks of intense atmosphere where the entire chain of scientific evidence, from cell site data, AI recovered video, geological soil samples, autopsy results, to witness testimony, was presented to the jury in a logical structure designed to most persuasively reconstruct the crime sequence. The prosecution opened with an overview, stressing that the case had stalled for 11 years, not due to lack of evidence, but because 2006 technology lacked the capability to fully exploit it. They then moved directly to the core. Modern scientific evidence had produced an inseparable chain of facts, from Diana's vehicle appearing at the casino to pinpointing the bodies in the woods south of Lake Thunderbird. The cell site expert was the first technical witness. He presented modern triangulation models that allowed far greater accuracy in locating 2006 cell phones than was possible at the time. Using enlarged maps, he traced Diana's movements, leaving home at 1:12 a.m., appearing in coverage near the casino at 1:19, then pinging the SE 104th Street Tower precisely when Mark and Karen lost signal. By simulating speed and direction from signal changes, he asserted that Diana's path matched the victim's exactly from 1:20, 1:41 a.m., a level of correspondence he called unrealistic, if merely coincidental. Next, the prosecution presented the AI-recovered video, one of the most striking pieces of evidence. The image analysis expert explained how the AI system reconstructed and enhanced the blurry 2006 footage, clarifying taillight shape, paint color, and rear window decal on the dark sedan in the casino lot. When projected on the large screen, the jury saw the distinctive taillights of a 2001 Toyota Camry, the model Diana owned. As the AI zoomed in and highlighted the oval decal on the rear window, jury members exchanged noticeable glances. The prosecution said nothing further, letting the image speak for itself. A composite sequence from cameras along I-35 and Douglas Boulevard showed consistent presence of Diana's vehicle behind the victims. When the prosecution emphasized that 3 independent video sources, casino, convenience store, intersection camera, all captured the same vehicle with matching features, the coincidence argument was effectively eliminated. Following the video, the geologist testified, presenting soil analysis showing near-perfect match between material under Diana's car and soil from the South Lake Thunderbird woods. He explained hematite ratios, reflective mica and clay loam structure as a geological fingerprint, stressing that this soil type did not occur where Diana lived, nor on major roadways, but only in the narrow band where the bodies were found. This testimony drew particular jury attention due to its irrefutable scientific grounding in location. The forensic pathologist then detailed the injuries. Mark and Karen suffered heavy blunt force blows to the head, causing skull fractures and rib breaks, with rapid death aligning with the phone signal loss. Based on defensive wounds, he confirmed the victims were surprised, but briefly resisted before losing consciousness, fully consistent with the abrupt phone cutoff. Asked whether the victims could have been attacked elsewhere and transported to the woods, he replied that such a possibility is extremely unlikely, as no post-mortem transport indicators were present. The prosecution's strongest asset was connecting the timeline, images, signals, soil, body location, and Diana's description into a seamless diagram. On the courtroom screen, an interactive map displayed the complete route of all 3 vehicles, Mark's Ford Taurus, Diana's Toyota Camry, and the path into the woods, merged into one continuous line. Each marker carried precise timestamps, rendering the entire structure an unbroken logical chain. The defense countered by attacking the techniques, questioning AI accuracy in video recovery, potential cell site distortion in terrain, and possible cross-contamination of soil onto Diana's car at another time. Prosecutors rebutted that AI only enhanced image quality without altering content, cell site data cross-checked against 3 other sources and matched temporally. Soil had unique micromineral traits impossible to transfer in an urban setting. The jury listened carefully to the rebuttals, but showed particular interest in Diana's precise description of the burial area, information no one but someone present at the scene could know. When the prosecution asked the lead investigator, "What enabled you to locate the bodies?" he answered, "Because the suspect described the exact spot in detail that even survey maps didn't record." The courtroom noticeably quieted. In closing, each side delivered final argument. The prosecution stressed that the evidence showed not merely Diana's presence in the crime corridor, but her following, approaching, inflicting injury and concealing the bodies, a consistent pattern aligned with an escalating jealousy motive. The defense sought reasonable doubt by urging the jury not to convict based on technology, but offered no alternative explanation for the sequence of events. When deliberations began, the jury retired with a file not only voluminous in evidence, but deeply logical in structure. Making their task weighty yet unavoidable, independent data streams had formed the only reasonable explanatory system, one pointing directly at Diana Ellison. After many weeks of trial and nearly 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom with a grave demeanor, indicating that a decision had been reached. When the judge asked the jury foreperson to announce the verdict, the entire courtroom held its breath. We, the jury, find the defendant Diana Ellison guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of Mark Ellison and Karen Holt, followed by first-degree kidnapping, evidence tampering, and staging of the crime scene. Diana closed her eyes, showing no clear reaction, while the families of both victims broke into tears, partly from the pain finally being eased after more than a decade of waiting, and partly from the shock of the ultimate truth being confirmed by the legal system. Entering the sentencing phase, the prosecution recommended life imprisonment without parole for both first-degree murder counts, emphasizing the brutality of the crimes, the deep personal motive, and the years-long effort to conceal them. The defense attempted to seek leniency, arguing that Diana had no prior history of violence and experienced mental instability in the period following the divorce. But the judge affirmed that these factors did not alter the calculated nature of the crimes or their severe consequences. In the final victim impact statements before sentencing, Mark's family representative spoke in a choked voice, saying they had lived for 11 years in uncertainty, not knowing where their son, brother, and father was, not knowing what had really happened, and that today does not bring Mark back, but at least he has been found and is now protected by justice. Karen's family representative stated that they prayed every day for someone not to give up, and expressed gratitude to the cold case unit for turning what seemed like a hopeless file into a story of persistence and justice. The judge then pronounced the final sentence, 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, along with additional terms for the related charges. The court's ruling confirmed that Diana Ellison would never leave Oklahoma State Prison, bringing an end to years of legal contention. News of the verdict spread quickly throughout the Oklahoma City community and surrounding areas. Many who had followed the disappearances for over a decade expressed relief that the mystery had finally been solved. Identifying the perpetrator not only delivered justice to the victims' families, but also restored public confidence in the ability to resolve long-dormant cases once thought unsolvable. Social organizations, support groups for families of missing persons, and many local media outlets recognized the case as a prime example of the value of investing in modern investigative technology, particularly the role of cell site triangulation, AI-enhanced video analysis, and forensic geological examination in breaking the deadlock of a cold case. The cold case unit officially closed the Mark Ellison, Karen Holt file with a nearly 200-page summary report that highlighted 3 key turning point factors: new technology that allowed recreation of 2006 data with superior accuracy, persistent re-examination of every minor detail, from peripheral witnesses to seemingly meaningless soil samples, and finally, the unwavering determination of the victims' families, who continually pressed the justice system not to let the disappearances fade into oblivion. The report also affirmed that this file has become a model in training for investigating cold cases, demonstrating that even when time has passed, evidence has degraded, and human memories have faded, forensic science can still connect scattered fragments into a complete truth. When the judge struck the gavel to close the proceedings, the case ended not only legally, but also marked the conclusion of a painful chapter that had weighed heavily on multiple families and the entire community for over a decade. The seats in the courtroom gradually emptied, but the echoes of the 11-year journey from a mysterious disappearance to a science-based resolution remained in the minds of those present, a testament that justice, even when delayed, can still be delivered with the full weight of truth and tireless pursuit. The story of the Mark Ellison, Karen Holt case, Though it occurred in 2006 and was only resolved more than a decade later, still reflects many issues present in American life today. The complexity of family relationships after divorce, the risk of escalation from controlling and harassing behavior, and the increasingly important role of technology in uncovering truth. Diana Ellison did not commit the crime in a moment of impulse. She developed patterns of control, jealousy, and stalking over many years, demonstrated through hundreds of calls to Mark, following him to casinos, purchasing fuel to avoid surveillance cameras, and tracking his movements. In contemporary American society, behaviors such as phone stalking, controlling schedules, bombarding with messages, or indirect threats are often downplayed, yet they are critical indicators of escalating violence in former relationships. This case reminds us that every boundary-violating behavior, no matter how small, deserves attention and early intervention, not only through law enforcement, but also through psychological support and community services. Another key lesson comes from the cold case unit's efforts. Truth can be buried, but with persistence, technology, and community cooperation, justice can still prevail. The use of AI for video restoration, cell site analysis, and soil examination is not merely a forensic story, it is a reminder that we live in an era where data can protect victims and counter seemingly perfect lies. Finally, the steadfastness of the victims' families, refusing to let the case be forgotten and continually demanding further police review, is proof of the value of community involvement in the American justice system. What we can take away for today's life: take warning signs in personal relationships seriously, trust the power of technology when used properly, and never underestimate the role of persistence in seeking truth. Thank you for joining us on this journey to close a haunting cold case after more than a decade. If you'd like to continue following stories of crimes solved through science and perseverance like this one, please remember to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring mysteries brought to light by justice and unrelenting effort.